Now,
No, that's about right.
all
So,
right, I appreciate that. The other thing is, I read in my news break feed something about a German private contractor offering tanks to Ukraine. Something about
I know
tanks.
a little bit about that. Yeah, there were
I
like
was
100 Leopard
reading.
ones.
I was reading it in my news feed. Let me see if I can even bring it up because I just was reading. And okay,
Hey,
but it said about that they were offering some more highly advanced tanks than what Ukraine already had.
oh, I'm not, hadn't heard that. So, yeah, go ahead and he could, yeah,
Now
DM me that or tweet me that.
I'll have to find it and then send it to you because it was on my
Yeah,
news break feed that came across my phone as I was reading like some of my local stuff and so forth here in the States. So, but I saw that and I'm like, that might not be a bad idea for a contractor to offer these up to the Ukrainians, knowing what they are up against. I mean,
yes, yeah,
Russia's economy is totally in the shitter, even though they won't admit it.
yeah, that's kind of what they are. They don't like to admit those kind of things. Prince, you're usually the information silo here. Have you heard anything about this? Uh, all I've heard about is Leopard 1 tanks of like a month ago coming from a private company that had bought them from Germany and was storing them. Wendy, could you please mute yourself when you're not talking? You got some. Thank you.
I think that you're Leopard tanks that they could work with Germany to backfill some of what the countries are giving or to give them to Ukraine. So this sounds to me, I haven't seen anything recently about this. This sounds to me like an older story from Rheinmetall saying they had 100 tanks that they could help to provide Ukraine with and to maybe backfill some of what is being given to Ukraine. That's where I would sort of stop with the information on that. I think it's old information that just hasn't been updated lately, and or maybe we'll hear about it in the next 24 hours. But I haven't seen anything recently about that.
Well, thank you for the questions, Wendy. We don't have any hands up.
Well, you guys have a very good evening. I'm just gonna move myself down to listening.
Okay, you're welcome to stay up as speaker and or listener. If anybody in the listening pool here, if you want to come up and speak or ask questions or maybe make fun of finance, we're all for that. But you can tap that little microphone in the left-hand corner and request to come up and speak. I will, since it appears that I have the floor right now, I will go ahead and announce that this is the NAFO section of MriyaReport. We, yeah, I think about the last time I looked through, just looking through the people that are listening in the space, it seems it's about 60% fellas. So and since Finance and I are both co-hosts, we're both fellas, we have the NAFO section here. And it is brought to you by Atacam's Cigarettes, the cigarette that smokes you, which Finance is the spokesman for.
Chief
We,
host.
Chief spokesman. Yes, the chief spokesman.
Yeah,
And we're here.
The title of my amazing company, the Atacams Brand Cigarette Company. Absolutely correct here. We at the Atacams Brand Cigarette Company bringing you all the finest in NAFO smoking memes. Because really, what do the Russian invaders need than a very extra large cigarette flying and dropping right on their disgusting orc heads? With that, we have one hand up. Welcome to Space Louisville. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's your question for this evening, sir?
Not really a question, but more like a comment. Well, yeah, like a question comment. What do y'all think of Australia joining like the nuclear powers? Like the United States and UK they helped them like build nuclear. Well, they gave them like nuclear submarines. So I think that would help. You think that would like help Ukraine, even though that's all the way like Australia is like so far away, but considering like China is like eyeing them for their resources.
Yes, right. So right. That's right. So the Australians are joining the nuclear sub pact with Great Britain. That's all about Australia is taking their militarization, their military supply levels more seriously because of China. Nuclear subs don't mean they have nuclear weapons on them specifically. It means that they have nuclear engines. So that's different than having a nuclear bomb on you. Because when you put a nuclear engine on a sub, it can really stay underwater for incredibly long periods of time. So yeah, they are building stuff. We do have a excellent. He is a U.S. military veteran, but he's now a citizen of the Australian penal colony. So we will kick it on over to our veteran from the penal colony, Will. Will, what is the Australian feeling about your new subs?
Yeah, good day, Farnez. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, Louisville. I live in Perth, Western Australia, and I've been an Australian citizen for about 30 years, but I still have this bad accent. Australia joined the AUKUS alliance with the UK and the United States to provide a nuclear-powered submarine fleet to replace our current Collins-class submarines, which are diesel-powered, for the reasons that Finance said. I think since that agreement was kicked off, the war in Ukraine started, and I think Australia's defense posture is being reviewed a bit now in relation to what we're going to need long term and medium term. But I don't think it'll affect those submarines. I definitely think we'll the initial 8 of those I think will either come from England or America or a combination of those, and then they'll get filled out to a fleet. I think 10 or 16 over a period of years that is going to be past when I pass away. So these programs take an incredible long time. And those are basically to fit into the Five Eyes sort of system and AUKUS alliance partners to make sure that Australia can play its role in monitoring and potential initial interdiction of any activity, war activity down in this area, which has been the traditional role of Australia since it joined. Since World War I. Now, I think the other thing that Australia is doing right now in its defense posture is actually reconsidering the manner in which it would defend itself in relation to a land invasion here, and the sorts of things that we need to have in place so that we can play our appropriate role if and when we had to participate in defending Taiwanese independence, and that includes things like they've Australia after this war began and the GLMRS was proved so successful. Australia, Ukraine can't get ATACMS, but Australia, we said, hey, can we have some of those ATACMS? And they went, yeah, here you go. So we're having ours replaced or added to already, because I think that sort of precision strike MLRS capability is has shown a real capability that can be used to stop things like landing craft invasions. They would be very helpful for that. So yeah, we're doing a bit of work, and Australia is providing not nuclear submarines or any submarines, but of course we're shipping a large contingent of our our Bushmaster IFVs over to or APCs over to Ukraine, and those are apparently incredibly well received. Although I have seen a couple destroyed too, but it looks like they carried out their function when they were destroyed. So those appear to be working. And most recently, we've committed to give Ukraine $22 million worth of lightweight drones, similar to the ones that the Orlan 10, which Russia fields, because it's a plane type thing, but they're very cheap, very easy to build yourself. It's like a DIY kit, and as long as you've got the componentry of an engine and a camera to hook onto them, can basically do all the things the drones are doing now, and that the Orlan 10 is doing now, and adds that capability for Ukraine, because that's another area where I think Russia, in sheer numbers, still has more drones than Ukraine does. But I would think catching up fast.
Will, I have a quick Australia military follow-up question, and it's slightly related to Ukraine, and then I'll go to Daniel. My quick military follow-up Australia question is, because Australia is literally its own continent, low density, lots of space. When you guys arm up and gear up for stuff, do you focus more on sort of mobility of assets, right? Like, is there a premium placed on, armored personnel carriers, things like HIMARS or whatever your indigenous artillery systems is, fast moving, whatever? Is that like at a premium in the Australian military, or what are the constraints, and my follow up to that is, if yes, sort of, is there domestic Australian produced stuff that's heading to Ukraine?
Australia is set up basically the same way any other NATO partner country would be in relation to it. We have a large contingent of straight up U.S. equipment, like I say, because just like I'm sitting here as a host, right? If you live in the right time zone, and America needs you as a very good friend in that time zone, you're not going to get scrimped on what you're allowed to have. M1A1s Abrams, yep, we've got those, 61 of them, I think, and we could transfer all those to Ukraine now, because we're already planning, and it was already decided before the war began, to give us the latest M1A2 or whatever tank it is, right? So that's coming. That Mick Ryan in particular has advocated us sending all of our current contingent of M1A1s to Ukraine. So we're set up like a standard maneuver NATO type army, but of course you're absolutely correct. No possible way you could defend the entire mass of this country, given all the places where people could land. But so it's quick reaction type force, and then basically I think the defense posture here is going to become be very hard to hold, be very hard to swallow. So if somebody was to landing craft invasion of Darwin Harbor and try to take over that area and the port and everything like that to control the northern part of Darwin, that you'd be able to interdict them prior to landing and do enough damage on them at landing that they couldn't take all of their initial objectives, and then be ready to call in Big Brother as soon as you can get him on the phone from across the ocean or around the world, because our defense in Australia relies incredibly heavily on a relationship with the United States that's existed since World War II, but with both New Zealand, Australia. The ANZUS alliance has been around since then, and we rely heavily on supporting forces from America after being the quick reaction force in the region to try to hold things initially. Did I miss part of that question?
No, perfect. That was appreciated. I'll go to Daniel, and I'll come back to you after we go to a couple of hands. Mr. Arfire, how is the fine Romanian morning at the normal hurricane?
Spring, it's spring and night, morning. What do you care about Australia? Australia is probably one of the least endangered parts of the world. I don't think they can help Ukraine at all. And the nuclear threat, in fact, because conjecture worsens a bit situation. That nuclear threats are needed just to make China insecure. Very, very easy. They are not submarines for submarine warfare. There will be submarines with attack capabilities. So we can launch an ICBM from that. And doesn't matter if you have a nuclear warhead or non-nuclear warhead. So when you have some submarines in 1,000 kilometers of Southeast China Sea, you can threaten Chinese. Just simple. And Chinese, at this moment, with their dictator, which is a good friend of Putin, share same view about the world, same paranoia about entitlement. Let's not be lying bastards. Let's be fair. China is perceived and they are taking measures to discourage any aggressive act against their neighbors. And their neighbors don't like them. Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore. No one asks why Singapore has so huge fleet for the size of this city-state, just to secure the Malacca Strait. And Australia has no problem with invasion. Who is mad? Thailand, who can try to threaten them. And even mighty India. To go so many thousands of kilometers to invade Australia is stupid. Even for Americans it will be stupid to try something like this. So now, I don't think Australia can help more Ukraine. If the size and the population and the economy is similar with Canada, they don't have huge stockpiles of weapons because they don't need it. Same like Canada. They don't need it. So I think this is the idea. The nuclear threats are just to keep in check China. Why not? Japanese, Australia, Americans, British subs. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows what they target. And don't make sudden moves. Don't make stupid ideas. Don't be Vlad. Something like that. See, don't be Vlad. That's
Yeah, Daniel, I 100% agree with you that, I mean, if you're talking about direct intervention, of course, there's nothing Australia can do strategically in this war. But I was just explaining, answering Finance's question in relation to the defense posture and what we're learning from this current war. But you are wrong a little bit in that Australia definitely can do more. Australia only has provided a much smaller portion of its capability to provide arms and armament to Ukraine, as opposed to other countries of a similar size. I'm sure we're probably behind Canada. And as I say, as Mick Ryan has pointed out, there was no reason when they first asked that Australia couldn't have sent its entire contingent of 61 M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. Could have done it. And Mick said we could have done easily.
no will. They will send in the United States to be upgraded to the latest version.
We're not sending them to be upgraded. We're getting new ones, and they'll be replaced. We could do, but Australia. The other thing Australia is doing now is providing. Our forces are in England, teaching a large contingent of the soldiers in Ukraine the basic combat tactics they need to go back. But we're part of the training contingent. We're providing bushmasters. We're providing drones. We're providing some humanitarian aid. But we could always do more. We could.
Hello. Yes, I'm back. Thanks. Yeah, that's. I don't. Not being an Australian or a Romanian, I don't feel I can really comment on this. But we have some hands, and let's see. I believe it's Carla and then Can Do.
Hello, I'm also from that penal colony, from the same town as Willis. There's something else we can do, and Will, I'm going to talk about Andrew Forrest for a minute, and you may be able to do it better than me, so feel free to back it up. In West Australia, we have a lot in the ground, such as lithium, iron ore, gold, etc. So there are some people who are very, very rich because they've been in that game. And one of them is Andrew Forrest. Andrew Forrest has got a net worth of 20 billion US. And he is in that club where they have vowed to give away their money to good causes before they die. So he has a philanthropic organization, something going there. And he's been in Ukraine right from the start. In June, he went to see Zelensky. And there is a foundation that was started, and he is putting in 500 million with an M. And that's what he calls seeding money. So finance, I'm hoping you understand what he's doing. So the seeding money, I understand, is to set up businesses, but he wants to get other investors involved. So he wants to make it much bigger and much bigger. He's also talked to Joe Biden about it. So there's some really some really powerful people are getting involved. Also, the Australian government. So this is what we can do for Ukraine, and I think it's a really important thing.
Yep, don't disagree. I don't disagree with your opinion on that at all, Carla. And everybody ought to do what they can from the perspective they can. And while Andrew Forrest is a very rich, I won't say oligarch, but he's a real rich guy, and he runs a private company, and they do not a public company, but he's done some things that have sort of been questionable. But genuinely, I think his heart is in the right place, and I applaud. Support companies in Ukraine and startup of companies in Ukraine, because that'll be crucial when this war is over to have that happen. And it's the sort of thing that I came back to Australia in 2008, intending not necessarily to go overseas and live and work ever again. But I spoke to my other company directors, and I said, maybe we'll have to go help build some stuff in Ukraine when the war's over. And surprisingly, those guys went, maybe that's not a bad idea. But I think we probably missed it.
No, I don't think so, because I think this there's so much to come, and because every night when the Russians put a bomb on it, there's something else that's got to be rebuilt. So I think there's lots of scope for investors, for people to go and help, basically. But yeah.
Sorry, I was having Twitter issues. I'm back. I will say you're correct. Look, the scope of need to rebuild Ukraine post-war, rebuild might be the wrong word, to build Ukraine, right? Like if the Azovstal steel plant gets rebuilt in liberated Mariupol, it's not going to be some ancient Soviet structure with ancient Soviet technology that's dirty and inefficient and manual. It will be a new steel plant and a new steel mill, and that huge structure underneath, if it's not a museum, is likely to be returned to a military structure, right? So I would say that things like that, Ukraine will build a new industry where old used to exist. That's just the way of things, and it's the better way to go about it. That's the way Ukraine thinks as it's moving forward. I will say that the needs we're talking about are running into the trillions of dollars with a T. So I believe it's the Australian billionaire has pledged 460 million to Ukraine. That's going with BlackRock, who is starting to run a huge private equity fund for the rebuilding of Ukraine, working with large investors. Originally, I was concerned because the language was suggesting that Zelensky was centralizing private equity things with BlackRock. I hate the word centralizing. One of the nice things about Ukraine is the decentralizing initiative. They're in a generational moment to get rid of oligarch influence, or at least disperse it down to a local level. Fighting monopolies, fighting entrenched mass inequality turns out to be quite good for competitive economies. You want more people to hold more wealth, not a few people to hold a ton of wealth and everybody else not to have it. The former is a better structure for an economy. It's also a more competitive structure. I will say that seeing them sign a deal with JP Morgan a couple weeks ago, February 23rd, I believe was the announcement, and that's for another rebuilding fund. JP Morgan is looking at an infrastructure fund, and they plan to start working with Ukraine during the war for private money supplying some of these infrastructure needs as Russia keeps its terror attacks going. So, but no, like we're talking about trillions of dollars of investment. That'll be government investment. It'll be private investment. It'll be local investment. It'll be foreign investment of all kinds will be needed to build Ukraine anew after this war. How much, in what ways, where, how exactly? Look, a lot depends on the military. Nobody's building $1 billion project when it could get hit by a cruise missile. Can't have that many, going to struggle to get enough, key industrial workers in when they're busy trying to repair all the cities that are damaged as they are. So there's a lot of work to be done, but this is a country that was talking about it within 2 weeks of the genocidal invasion. Basically a year before now, Zelensky was literally talking about just this. So I'm quite enthused about the future here. Nathan, you seem to have the order of hands tonight, and I never can remember it tonight. So you're back to you.
Can do, and then Daniel.
Hey, Will. Can you hear me all right? I have a question for you.
You're a little quiet, Can do.
Here, is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, excellent. I just had a question about those 60 Abrams tanks that you mentioned. Are those the type that have the depleted uranium chassis on them? Because I remember hearing that there was some issues with re-export for those particular tanks with the depleted uranium. They had to be swapped out before they could be re-exported.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. They would have to have the DU armor removed. But Mick Ryan was saying, they're as they get retired and changed over, that's gonna happen anyway. Why don't we start that right now and just hand them over? I mean, this is, I don't know, when were we talking about tanks? A month and a half, 2 months ago? It's the sort of thing that if they could make a quick decision on it, like, this reminds me of the Polish MiG-29s, right? You literally have a situation where there are pilots that are qualified and experienced on flying a MiG-29 in Ukraine, and there's like 29 or 30, something like that, MiG-29 sitting in Poland unused, planned to be replaced. that could be shipped over there today, or half of them today, or how many pilots they need. So yeah, you're right. We would have had to undergo the process and the approval from the United States for re-export of those, including the removal of the DU armor. But I don't think if there's a will, there's a way that process takes months and months.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's the.
I have a question. I have a question though. I'm sorry.
Well,
That sort
I'll,
of applies to this.
Daniel has his hand up. Can you wait, or should it go with this current thread?
It's about the tanks. And my question is, and I don't know this. It may be like yes or no. Do the exported Abrams tanks have depleted uranium, or are the export versions without the depleted uranium? I don't know that. I think that I don't know.
Yes, export versions have the DU armor removed and a different style put on there.
So there shouldn't be any depleted uranium on the Australian tanks.
Not unless hit by a depleted uranium artillery shell, of which there are plenty in and around. Some of the armaments or artillery being used has DU in it.
Okay, that cleared it up for me. I just wanted to ask that really quick. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to Daniel. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Daniel.
I think talking about Abrams is futile. I know you are, most of you online Americans. If that Abrams will come, will be probably end of the summer, beginning of the autumn. And I think then will be a bit late for what are necessary. So all the task will be Leopard 2, Leopard 1, Challenger, Abrams will be later. I saw some encouraging news about production speed increase in the factory, but I don't think even in Kiev anyone has high hopes for Abrams this summer. So let's forget about this subject a bit, because it's useless. I know what does it mean national pride, but sorry about that. I raise my hand. See, shoot.
But Daniel, if the long-term strategy for Ukraine after the war's over is to have something like an M1A1 Abrams tank as their main battle tank, it still would make sense to send these things. This is part of what I don't understand about people talking about weapons. You have to think about the current and the future.
Totally agree. For example, we will buy a battalion of Abrams also. So it's nothing weird, but for the short term is about next month. Probably the offensive will start in 1 week, 10 days max. In my humble opinion, because I'm not military and everybody tries to explain me how stupid I am, and I understand that. Where is my hand was because I need to make a shout out to David D. American veteran. He's a bit, everybody is flawed, including me. But he made a very nice observation. 2 days ago, a British media outlet posted about the transfer of military help from Iran to Russia via Caspian Sea. And I read it there about maybe 200,000 artillery shells. Of course, shells of 152 and 1 to 2 meters. Some helmets, some armored vest. But his observation, which is very interesting, was they import 1 million, 2 million pounds for AKs, 7.62. And his observation is quite valid. If you need to import from Iran assault rifle munitions, you are in a deep shit. Deep. Imagine Russia. We have huge amounts of ammunition, huge amounts of tanks. And you go to import ammunition for your soldiers from Iran. It is pathetic. This is stupid. This is moronic. So if anyone had some national self in Moscow and the guts to go to tell Mr. Vladimir Vladimirovich, you know, master, 50 countries delivered everything from aircraft missiles to artillery shells. And we need to import submachine munitions from Iran, probably China, probably North Korea. Even their allies like Uganda deliver them something. But they come late because, you know, the British go around the world with tons of cash and buying book. I don't know if you Americans receive the information, which in Europe time was put it very bluntly. Bulgaria, for example, sent ammunition and military help 1 billion euros value. And this Soviet side ammunition, parts, BMP, are very cheap, extremely cheap, more cheap than anything West is building. So imagine that is just Bulgaria, 1 billion. Look how much it costs one artillery shell, and you can draw a conclusion. So before rebuilding Ukraine, they need to win the war. And it's encouraging, very, very encouraging. Put it in the context, Russia needs to buy Iran munitions. Ridiculous. Okay. I hope they will be crushed totally.
Well, yes, we hope that. And we would like to welcome up our very own, everyone's favorite gunnery sergeant, Gunny.
Morning all. Just quickly, just reference the Abrams. I think everyone's kind of got themselves absorbed into the DU armor question. I personally don't think they'll take it out. It just amuses me somewhat that everyone seems to think the Americans are perfectly happy for an M1 with all its optics, thermals, Sabo rounds really well. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, when the UK isn't stripping Challenger of anything, so obviously we are very happy and content with the idea of passing on Challenger and running the risk of the Russians getting their hands on one. I don't think anyone really cares about the DU armor on an Abrams. It's not the most important system on board an Abrams tank. I would respectfully suggest there is probably a lot more sensitive stuff on there.
Yeah, that's
this is
100%
less
right.
this is less to do with stripping vehicles of sensitive equipment and more about just training them and getting them in numbers into theatre, to be honest with you.
But Gunny, isn't are the tanks that are being supplied by the United States, the M1A, they're going to provide the full capability ones, I thought, or they're not going to produce some stripped down ones to send to Ukraine, are they?
No, they're not. I mean, the US isn't going to send all steel Abrams. So this will be the vehicle with the composite armor package, which the UK developed. We're sending Challenger with Dorchester on it, which is the next generation up, fielded with our latest optics system for the Charlie 2. So I think,
and the targeting system and the optics system would be the most sensitive items in there, I would think, wouldn't they be?
yeah, exactly. Fire control system, even the ammunition, the radios, because don't forget they're going to be using encrypted radio sets as well. So there's going to be crypto, all that kind of thing. Look, all of this is going. So if you think DU ammunition, which really, as I understand it, is just plate, is being stripped out, then I think probably the Russians are already aware you can use DU. They choose not to do it because it's phenomenally expensive, and they will be a lot more interested in the composite armor. That's the important bit on this: the composite armor packages, and the electronics on board. I think the DU armor thing is a red herring for people.
I agree with you in full, but the question was asked: is that covered by the re-export license from America to if Australia was to re-export its tanks? We have to get approval for a whole bunch of things, and the question was, does that cover the DU armor? And it does, but I agree with you that it's not the most significant thing that would be covered by a re-export license. And from what you said, I don't think they'd actually require, the U.S. wouldn't require us to do anything to our Australian M1A1 Abrams if the Australian government did decide to provide them on to Ukraine. And my point on that would be, it's really about the long term. And if the long-term solution for Ukraine is to have M1A1 Abrams as their main battle tank, why not just go ahead and send as many of the Australian ones as we can now, because they should be in the pipeline to get over there.
I think for people, I know it's really easy to say, but I think, and we get it in the UK as well, why do we need challengers? No one's invading soon. Well, if you went by that rationale, you wouldn't have a military, would you? So this, well, you don't
speaking Russian already, man.
Yeah, you don't need it now. So why don't you send everything? Nations don't think like that, and very rightly so, because first and foremost, the security of your own country is the government's prime responsibility. So I think this is less unwillingness to supply kit and more an acceptance of the fact the world is bloody unstable and wars come out of absolutely nowhere. 1982, we were about to sell one carrier to Australia and scrap the other one. And then 2 years later, we're 4 carriers. We're going to be a 4-carrier fleet. 1990, when I joined the 1990, I was told, we were all told the Cold War is over. You're now going to be entering a stage where the Royal Navy does a lot of policing globally, a lot of disaster relief, and there's a good chance that you will not see any major conflict. A year later, I was in a fucking minefield with battleships firing over me. So that went well, didn't it? Who foresaw Yugoslavia? 9/11. Everyone's life changed, didn't it? UK military was poodling along, doing some worldwide commitments. A few months later, we're up to our knuckles in Afghan. And that ultimately cost for over 450 lives. So I think nation states are very kind of aware that world affairs are funny old things. And the minute that you remove capability from your armed forces, sure as eggs, you're going to need that capability. And you're really going to rue the day that you got rid of it. And I think hopefully that's something that we're all waking up to.
Yes. I guess with Daniel and Gunny up at the same time, we have the dual threat of filling up that swear jar. Just a reminder, it's a family-friendly program. Gunny, I was under the impression that the main reason there was an issue with depleted uranium was more of some esoteric laws about shipping uranium across international lines or something like that.
Well, if that was the case, you'd have months of delay in moving US military equipment across Europe during major NATO exercises, wouldn't you? And things like that. So I don't think, I think it's something that's quietly sort of encouraged by the powers that be, just to give the impression that this kit is going to be in theatre a lot later than it will be. And I would just remind everyone, well, the one thing you don't do in the military is advertise to the opposition what you've got, where it is, and when you're going to use it. OSINT communities are really good at sort of, taking the word of government to go, oh, this kit's not going to be in theatre for a year. Why? You ask them, and why? Why would everyone announce timeframes, availability, and numbers of equipment to a country that's at war? That's not how the military do things. In 1991, we didn't send daily bulletins to the Iraqis about what was in theatre, where it was, what was getting moved around, what was going to go up the coast road, etc. Why would we suddenly do it now? I think it's a Twitterati problem of, I must be informed because I'm OSINT and I must know things and I can predict stuff. Well, no, you can't really. You're a vehicle for governments to spread information and disinformation and misinformation, because we are all part of the info war against the Russians. So again, I just think kits. I think a lot more kits in theatre than you know. I think a lot of kit is probably being moved by routes that will probably really surprise all of us. And I think this kit is being integrated into mechanized units, and now it's just a case of how quickly can they get up to speed, and when is the weather going to be good enough to use it. But there's going to be a lot more disinformation flying around before things really kick off, and then you will all sit there, you'll look at your phone and you'll click your fingers and you go, yeah, of course, why didn't we even see that?
Can I
Well said.
can I ask our speaker to allow me to put a question to Gani before he goes to work?
Yeah, Louisville has been waiting a while, but he can wait a little bit longer because Daniel Larfire gets what he wants here.
I'm sorry, mate. Gani, I want to ask you something because yesterday I entered in a clash with my Romanian fellows, and they slapped me hard because, I'm not military, I'm a stupid civilian. My entire diatribe was something like this. Why Romania, our fucking politicians, allow caliber missiles to go via Dniester River to go west of Odessa Mykolaiv anti-air batteries, to hit Thermopyl, to hit Chernobyl, to hit Lviv. And I was very, very, very pissed because Moldova has not air police. Their air defense is laughable. Their army is extremely small. And I'm not imagining, let alone the political reasoning, is just cowardice. Why Romania air defense don't try to secure that location? The Republic of Moldova secured the western flank of Ukraine. And everybody say, oh, if you shot a caliber missile and is in airspace at limit of Ukraine borders, you just entering the war with Russia. This was a logical argument. But my idea was very simple. If you put F-16, if you put Gepard, if you put anything you have to air defense in Moldova, not allowing any missile to enter in their airspace, you make all the things much easier and Black Sea fleet irrelevant. I hope I had some logic. And thank you, Lisa.
Gunny?
I think we lost Connie. So yeah, he shows connecting for me. Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I
Yes,
got
Dave.
you. I don't have Gunny.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for him to reconnect, we'll go to Louisville.
All right. About the old MiG-29s. I feel like Poland is the last country to hold out on Ukraine for anything. Whatever they say, I feel like they support them 150%. And actually, they are planning on sending them. They're just not going to say, everything that they're going to do. And I feel like the reason for that is because they need to do their maintenance and inspection, and they don't want their planes flying out the sky like how Russian jets are. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
No, I think that's fair enough, and I would reiterate support for what Gunny said too, which is, and it's interesting. The Australian government normally doesn't tell us anything when there's a war going on, right? They don't tell us anything about our movements, other what they've done. It takes a forever. They're very secretive about any military information, and so I'm completely happy with that here in Australia because, like Louisville alludes to. And Gunny said that absolutely no way Poland should say a word when they're going to send those. They should just do it, right? It's in the quiet, on the quiet, so that they minimize their risk to not having any coverage if they get F-16s flown in to replace them or whatever. Yeah, they don't say anything. And my motto is all Western support coming into the country. I don't care if I don't hear about it until I see it on Channel 1 Russia. Smoking orcs. That's my preferred method of finding out when new weapon systems are in theater is right off Channel 1.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I echo Louisville's sentiment that Poland has been behind Ukraine from the very beginning. I think they of all people realize that if Ukraine goes, they're next. And so their best bet is to help Ukraine, so it never comes to a fight on their border.
Yeah, I what's the comment you military guys like to use? The means is the message, right? The equipment's there when it's going boom.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of things going boom, or more correctly, not going boom, I just came across a intelligence report from Ukraine, um, talking about they have information about key Russia warehouses that are now extremely low in artillery rounds and artillery shells. And in fact, they are being forced to use artillery shells that have been stored improperly and have visible signs of damage. Ukraine officials are saying they're expecting uh, Russia's ability to use artillery to drastically be reduced in the next 2 or 3 months. Just my little tidbit of
No, I
goodies.
also saw that Dave, and I mean it is indicative of potential problems, like the commander of Vuhledar complaining about lack of shells given to Wagner, or Wagner complaining about not getting enough stuff. So it's indicative of potential supply chain problems. But and if their shells in storage are incredibly bad shape and their small arms ammunition is not stored correctly, it's going to be very problematic, which I would reckon is probably, good guess, endemic in a lot of Russia. But the thing about Russia is they just overproduce so much military stuff. Like I was talking about with artillery, their entire planning doctrine seems to be based on more of everything, no matter what the quality is. And they would have produced scads and scads of artillery shells and ammunition that they've got in storage. But the question is, when they bring it to the theater, is it going to be usable and functional? And yeah, it's an unknown. There have been reports of, as you said, problems and shortages of artillery on the Russian side, but I just don't know how much of that to believe, because they seem to still be able to throw more artillery shells downrange every day than the Ukrainians can.
Well, may the Russians be ever short on their artillery shells, and hopefully some of them are blowing up literally in their faces. With that, Mr. Arfire.
That's also happening too. You know, some of the S-300s that they've been trying to fight, you would have seen out of Belgorod when they launched a bunch of S-300s, that they did the big woo rocket spitty dance and crashed back down onto Belgorod.
Sounds like the right kind of equipment to me, the kind that blows up Russia. Mr. Arfire.
Okay, I entered in Romanian NATO channel. It's shocking. Alexander Maciejewski, the soldier assassinated by Wagner, you know, what Russians tried to cover up with no train debacle in 24 hours, because he was assassinated and recorded when he shouted Slava Ukraine and Anad. Alexander Maciejewski was born in Chisinau, in the Republic of Moldova. Yeah, it was Ukrainian origin because, you know, in Soviet Union, a lot of Ukrainians and Russians live in the Republic of Moldova, but the idea is it's from there, from the Republic of Moldova. He moved back to Ukraine 20 years ago, almost. But it sounds weird. You know? Probably had Moldovan passport. I will not be shocked to have even a Romanian passport. So, yeah.
So you're saying the guy that was assassinated by the Russians was or no, you know, the prisoner of war guy. He's originally from Moldova.
He was born there in Soviet Union time. In Moldova, a lot of people moved, especially Soviet military veterans. And people, usually Russians and Ukrainians, move in Moldova because, you know, weather is nice. The Republic of Moldova was probably one of the wonderful places to go in Soviet Union. Crimea was banned. It was very hard to enter in Crimea because they treat it like military fortress. So if you want to retreat somewhere where it is not minus 10 degrees Celsius at this moment, you go to Georgia or the Republic of Moldova. You don't go in Central Asia or in Baltic. A lot of people in Soviet Union go to Baltic because, you know, it was the most developed part of Soviet Union. And he was born in 1980 in Chisinau, and he moved in 2008, if I remember right. Yeah, so he's born in Chisinau. Yeah. Official information is not some rumor. It was posted by National Television of Moldova.
That's interesting. Thank you. That we have no hands up here, finance. So, you have anything you would like to talk about?
Thank you for bringing the background to us, Daniel. Do appreciate that. Certainly, he brought the atrocities of the Russians, unfortunately, to the forefront by having the misfortune of being killed on video, and we've now all seen it, which is itself particularly awful. If you don't know what I'm talking about, good. But on the other hand, it's a problem that it wasn't on your nightly news, which is where it rightfully belonged. But what do I know? I just deliver news here because we find there to be so many problems with our major sources. We have de-Russified one, and we have it here, the MriyaReport with 24/7 Ukraine news and discussion. Mr. Arfire, back to you.
Gani, did you hear what I asked for you?
Gunny appears to be away or at work. I'm going to push him down. Gunny going
No. He's
Gunny twice.
Yeah.
Nope, Gunny's there.
Sorry about
Gunny.
Sorry about that. I entered. I had the audacity to go 5 feet from my house to the car, which of course cut me off from all 21st century comms.
All right, great. Well, welcome back. The 23rd century comms have a question from the 21st century from the hurricane in Romania, Mr. Daniel Arfire.
Did you hear anything, Gani, what I asked you?
No, I think I heard the sound of passing traffic, which is normal with you, and that's about it, mate.
Okay, mate. Hear me out. It's stupid idea Romania to policing Republic of Moldova airspace because they don't have aviation and their air defense is trapped. It's stupid idea to move assets to destroy any caliber going around western side of Odessa Mykolaiv defense and use the Dniester River to shoot calibers in Lviv or Thermopyl. It's so stupid idea because I get a lot of backlash from my Romanian fellows.
I think the problem is that if any NATO member starts shooting down missiles, it turns us into a combatant. That's the bottom line here. We're already walking a narrow line in the NATO I-STAR is providing a huge amount of targeting and general intelligence to the Ukrainians, and that is killing Russians, just indirectly. We're not pulling the trigger, but we're saying here, there they are. I think NATO is very wary about actually becoming a physical combatant, and shooting down Russian missiles is what would happen. Think about it, and NATO E3 AWACS provides raid warning to Ukraine. That's the actions of a combatant, really. You could argue it. It's just that both sides are sort of, let's not go down that road where Russians are chasing after NATO E3s. So I think I-STAR, airborne early warning, that kind of thing, tick. I think NATO physically shooting down Russian missiles would probably be a step too far for the Russians, and we could probably expect some kickback. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how bad those bastards are, we do not want a shooting war with the Russians at the moment until it's time to have a shooting war, right? Because it will not just be in Ukraine. People just go, well, we should kick the Russians in the testicles, and then they'll back off. It will be short, brief, and bloody, and it will stretch from the North Cape all the way down to the Mediterranean. So I still think let's just keep this nice. Let's both sides push the boundaries a little bit, but exchanging shots will help no one, and it might escalate into something that we really, 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 really don't want.
I understand very well. Thank you. It's illuminating and make me to look a fool, but it's better to learn from mistakes. But using epic things to cover the Republic of Moldova airspace will discourage them to use that area going west of Odessa with calibers.
Well, I mean, if the Moldovan government formally requests NATO secure their airspace, who knows? I don't know. Until they do that, no one's going to do anything. You can't go. The UK couldn't go shooting missiles over France. We shoot missiles at France because that's what we've done over the centuries. But you don't go shooting missiles over another sovereign state without their permission. It's bad enough the Russians are chucking stuff over their airspace. They might get a bit of a sad on if Romania starts firing missiles over their airspace as well, because then you've got the danger of rounds coming down, landing on buildings, etc. See, I think the Moldovans are in a corner. There's not a lot they can do. They request NATO, the Russians will kick off. If they don't request NATO, the Russians will just keep flying missiles over them. So, what can they do? Maybe if a missile has a malfunction and lands on a Moldovan town, you might see a change in Moldovan government policy, and they'll formally request that we implement a air defense zone over it. But I think it's going to take that, to be honest. I think otherwise the Moldovans are just going to have to sit on their hands and wait for this to play out.
I was a bit pissed, and I treated this. Okay, I'm very harsh with our politicians because they are crap, because they are corrupt, and they are weak. And I treated this like very proactive attitude because we say we help Moldova, we trust Moldova, we had citizens there. It's important for us, things like that. And I was always feeling a lot of words, less action, less trusting their forces. And of course, I was mistaken because you have experience, I don't. And I want to add this. The European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said in the summer they will offer via European Union assistance to Moldova. Cyberspace, borders, security, a lot of things. But last one in that paragraph was air defense. So European Union, because Moldova is has the status of candidacy, will receive help from European Union, meaning air defense, which is looking very, very interesting. And I hope they get it faster. And I want to say thank you, Germany, to sending some Piranha to Moldova. But I think a more proactive attitude is better. Domen always say, you know how the politics is in Moldova, how anything Romania is doing is interpreted by pro-Russians, like, imperialists, Romanians want the territory, all the mantra in Moscow about unification and all the bullshit. But European Union already stepped in, at least declarative. They will send air defense. And I was well intentioned, but he explained to me very well, NATO must not shoot down any Russian missile. Thank you. I will put mea culpa everywhere.
Oh, did Daniel just say mea culpa? I guess so. Anybody hear me? Hello? Finance, can you hear me? No?
Yes, it's all okay.
I can hear
It's
you.
all okay.
Okay. Some people can hear me. Some people can't. Or is finance just joking?
Welcome to MriyaReport. We have fun here. We do our best too. All right.
Haha.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you for being a good sport. All right. So, yeah, major news stories. Obviously, we're still the huge attack yesterday. Sadly, a lot of the news now hard to not focus domestically, given we've hit one of those, at least in my world, financial moments where financial news leaks off the business page and hits the normal pages, and everyone starts calling me, wondering what's going on. Without delving too much into it, yes, we're in a recession. I've been saying this on Space for a year and used to get yelled at for it. And then I said, no, here are the economists that back me up. We're in a supply side recession. Two, and ourselves is what pulled us out of the Great Depression. So no, this should not be a cause for stopping supply in Ukraine. If anything, it should be a cause for massive aggressive industrialization domestically in the US of military supplies, because there's a whole lot of demand in the democratic world, as a bunch of people just realized that they have their pants down. I think that's the way I could say that. They have forgotten to supply themselves for 30 years, and that maybe the world might be a bit more violent than we'd like, and the free countries of the world need to have some arms if they want to stay that way. So makes a nice business opportunity for those countries that wish to produce arms. South Korea is absolutely going down this road quickly and hard. The US is starting to. We could do a metric ton more, or in our case, the American tons, like many more of those. That would actually help our economic situation. So, they're going to put together a bill for Ukraine. If you wanted to have a help us get out of a recession spin to it, just push really hard to have a bunch of stuff produced here, a bunch of logistics work done here to, say, upgrade our train system, maybe hire Alexander Commission to do that, because if you've ever ridden the rail in the States, you will wonder why it's so bad. If you've also ridden the rail in Europe, because it's pretty bad. So, there's a lot we could do. There's a lot that would help these kinds of things, given we have supply side driven inflation, would both help fix the supply side, help deal with the issues in employment, and help our infrastructure challenges. So there are things to be done. That is the economic story for the day. Fortunately, a little outside of Ukraine, but like clockwork, we will be seeing the stupid takes of why in a recession should we be supporting the foreign aid. Foreign aid is usually under political fire in a recession. I would like to give a shout out to the Great Britain, who has had a difficult economic times for the last year. And despite having a string of quite unpopular prime ministers domestically, all of them have been very pro-Ukraine, as have the British people broadly overall. So thank you all, Brits. Good job. Hope we can follow your lead here in the United States. So far, it is the one thing we politically agree on, and it really is like the one thing. I don't even know if we can all agree that like our mothers love us right now. It's pretty partisan over here, but we do all agree. The only thing that gets you standing innovation right now is supporting Ukraine. There's obviously a whole bunch of nut jobs, a few more on the right than on the left, but they are the extremes of both sides that do not support Ukraine. And I think we should just move them all to Russia, where they can go get mobilized, and then we don't have to deal with them. But since that's not going to happen, we're going to have to deal with them here and get back to being the bastion of freedom we want to be. I also see our favorite fan of special equipment, Mrs. Special Equipment herself, Mockers, is awake. So hopefully she will get some coffee and inform us about her favorite thing in the world, the destruction of special equipment. You're listening to the MriyaReport. It is almost midnight. When it hits midnight Central Standard Time, it will be 8 a.m. Kyiv time. You can figure out what time it is around the world compared to Kyiv time. We are 24/7 giving you updates on Ukraine. Thankfully, it was a quieter evening. There were not a bunch of terror missiles. Give or take, Russia appeared to fire 1 month's worth of production of their missiles at Ukraine. We have some idea because Ukrainian defense has posted how many missiles they think Russia is making per month. So that was about how many they fired in one morning. Hopefully somebody can figure out how to blow those factories up so they can stop making those missiles. We can stop having mornings where we're wondering if our friends are okay and calling them up to see if they have power. This is pretty ridiculous. So hopefully someone figures out how to get some Ukrainian sabotage teams back there, get some of those Zaluzhny smoking Atacam cigarettes back there. But if not, we will probably keep having to deal with this. We do know that they are running 3 shifts at the Rosatom missile factories because, welcome to the age of the internet, we get to see online job postings. And even in horrific terror states, they post jobs for the missile factory third shift online. And we all of a sudden got to discover that the missile factory third shift months ago was being staffed up. So fortunately, they do have some kind of machines still running that thing that are able to keep kicking out more of these terror missiles. They would be normal military missiles if they use them for a normal military purpose, but they don't know how to do that. So here we are. All right. Mrs. Special Equipment herself, the one and only dating expert of the MriyaReport. Marcus.
Oh, there is special equipment too. I've got some numbers. Would you like them?
Only if they're delivered by you.
Oh, well, that's handy because I'm here. Yeah, so numbers. A little bit early this morning. But I thought I would bring them to you, Finance, because I'm sure you're going to appreciate them. We have 870 liquidated personnel, 7 tanks, 6 armoured personnel vehicles, 10 artillery systems, and 3 MLRFs, 2 anti-aircraft war systems, 1 aircraft, 9 UAVs, 34 cruise missiles. I think we can figure those out. Only 6 vehicles and fuel tanks, but 3, oh yes, 3 special equipment. So I think altogether that's quite a good haul, actually.
Very much so. I know one of those special equipment was one of their so-called special flamethrowers, that mobile things that shoot highly inaccurate thermobaric explosives. But there's a video of the thing fires and then a drone comes flying in and takes it out.
I've seen that video actually, and it ends with a very nice boom. It's lovely.
And I
So,
imagine
this is one of those things that we heard were particularly problematic.
Sorry. Yeah, apparently so. They're nasty things, but not indestructible. So that's okay. Oh, sorry, I've got a cat looking at me here. I've fed the other 2 and I haven't fed him. Apologies, mate. There we go. Right, so I'm going to make some coffee, and then I might actually be able to be awake and alive and speak to you properly. But do tell me, did we have a quieter night than the night before, at least?
Yes, it was a quiet night. The good and or bad news of that is that the amount of rockets fired at Ukraine, more or less, is the estimate, or is the number, but I think that's an estimate, put out by the Ukraine armed forces for how much Russian rockets they are able to produce a month. We do know they went to 3 shifts at Rosatom, their missile company, and it has 100. All these big Russian military conglomerates have like 130 sub companies. So either call it the missile company or the parent name, as best I know it or can pronounce it. But we do know they went to 3rd shift because they advertised online for it. So some various watchers of Russia went, oh look, they're going to 3rd shift and staffing that more aggressively. So they are making missiles still. We know about how many they're making a month, and that was about how many they shot yesterday. So for better or worse, we're hoping they can't do that again for a month. Much better would be if some saboteurs could get up to their missile plants and make it go boom, so that we wouldn't have to have that kind of night in Ukraine and morning in Ukraine, and we don't have to all go call our loved ones and see if they're okay and see who has power. And the bright side, we don't have to ask how the guys in the armed services are doing when a bunch of missiles fly over their heads, because they're not aimed at them at all. They're aimed only at the civilians. So back to you, Marcus.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we haven't had any major missile strikes again, because they do have some, I'm sure. But yes, you're right. It is quite telling that the amount that we know that they can produce is approximately what they used. So, yeah, it leads you to believe there's a bit of an issue there for them. And, well, long may that continue. However, what were you saying about things mysteriously blowing up in Russia?
Oh,
Some time ago, yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you had a story. Please continue.
Yeah, some time ago, there was somebody interviewed, was it Budinov? And he said, yes, there are lots of fires in Russia. Some of them are accidents and some of them are not. And that's all he said. There was also a suggestion by somebody else that, well, there are lots of Ukrainian patriots in Russia. They just don't know them yet. So I do believe that, I mean, especially some of these people who were deported into Russia. I mean, you know, are you a patriot? Do you have any, you know, Ukrainian tattoos or anything? No, sir. Love Russia, me. Love Russia. Oh yeah, it's great. That's all for me. That, and you know, so you get in with the gang, and then you go about doing what you're supposed to do in the first place. I don't know. I'm a suspicious soul, and I just think there might be a few of these people hanging around Russia, up to no good.
I think that's
Exactly.
up to lots of good. I would also say that we've had a number of articles of who knows if they're accurate or not, because all of this is the House of Mirrors, that is intelligence and covert ops.
Oh.
But a number of articles on, there have been a number of articles about Ukrainian special forces that may be infiltrating Russia. I think it would be idiotic to believe that of the 330 industrial fires last year, that none of them were special ops. And I think it would be crazy to believe that all or even most of them were special ops. Some absolutely were. I mean, especially the one where we know that the Ukrainian air assets went and blew up that refinery, but some of them absolutely weren't, right? Like Russia's designed a system to light itself on fire. But for something like Rosatom, they might be more serious about how they do stuff there. It might take somebody doing some serious dastardly deeds to get that thing to do what it needs to do and go boom. Mockers, then my favorite fella, Anda.
Yeah, I was just going to add that some of these things that are blowing up in Russia are indeed quite things that you would think they might need, you know, quite important to what they're doing. Well, we know there is a small amount of Russian partisans as well. So, you know, I'm sure there's some sort of network going on, just generally making themselves a nuisance, and good for them. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning. How are you? How is everyone?
Well, better than last night because our friends aren't under terror missiles.
Well, that's good. I heard there were a lot, so they should take a break. I heard you saying something about 3 shifts for Russia. I'm sorry to make you say that again. With what?
So three shifts means you're running your factory 24 hours a day. And this is at the missile factory that they were hiring for a third shift. So they were hiring. So usually a shift is 8 hours in an industrial plant. So a third shift, this is the way it was translated to me by the person I read on it. The third shift at Rosatom meant that they were hiring for somebody to work the overnight shift, is what we call it in the U.S. The third shift. So Rosatom, the missile factory, is. I don't know if they have all the things they need for it, but they are running it 24 hours a day to try to make these missiles. And
Yes, I'm sorry. At some point, I read. At some point, I read. I'm bonking. Right now. I'm sorry. At some point, I read a piece of news that they are hiring prisoners, so people from penitentiaries, in order to work because they don't have enough. Is that remotely true, or is something that, you know, it was just a joke of someone on the internet?
I have not read that specifically, but given Russia's record on human rights, it would make sense. Hired is probably the wrong term here. We do know that some of the prison factories that make uniforms are short-staffed due to Prigozhin's conscription for the Wagner Group. But it would also make sense if the very inept way that conscription was applied throughout the Russian Empire meant that locally, that there's some locales like Moscow and St. Petersburg that have significant numbers of men. There's other locales where they took all the men. So if there's a factory near there, they might need to use the prisoners. The other side of that is there are factories where they showed up and said, hey, you're going to conscription office today, right? Sign up for war now. And the conscription officers walked to the factory. But the result of that is a lot of Russian men didn't go to the office after that, especially if they just got a notice and they weren't forced to go there right away. Because when the Russian conscription officers are going to pick you up at work, if you don't want to go die in Ukraine, you don't go to work. So there are a number of places where they are short workers. It is geographically uneven. They are doing things to make it worse because of the way they are conscripting men in Russia. And it would make perfect sense if in some of the regions where they had a key factory making something they needed and they had literally no men left because they sent them all to die in Ukraine, that they would send prisoners in. So no, I have not read that, but yes, it would make sense. If you have a specific article for that, I'd love to read it. Like, that's right up my alley and quite curious. But as I said, I haven't read anything like that. It would be systemically possible. Russian prisoner slave labor is something they've used for years, so not new. And we're going to go over to mockers.
Yeah, I was just going to note that they're probably also going to start having problems when it comes to their harvests as well, because usually in the past, the armed forces have assisted with harvesting of potatoes and vegetables for the, internal consumption. And these things are done by the army generally because that, they're a cheap workforce. And so they've done an awful lot of that sort of thing in the past, assisting with harvest and, general labouring and things like that to for the betterment of the country, obviously.
I think they're going to call that training. I think that's how you get trained before you get sent to the front in Ukraine when harvest season comes.
I think most of them will be fertilizer for the harvest, but there we go. So I have a funny feeling that there's going to be problems that come up because a lot of those people probably aren't there anymore to do that stuff.
Oh no, that's true. I'm just cynical enough to expect that little Vlad was going to mobilize some more guys. So unfortunately, I have this view, given this is what Russia do, and sadly, this is also the view of every former Soviet Union academic I talk to that isn't Ukrainian. So Not the Ukrainians say something different to me, just that they're like, that sounds terrible, but yeah, it sounds about right. So, yeah, my guess is there will be a new wave of Mobics. Unfortunately, at that time, hopefully I'm wrong. It'd be great if Russia came to its senses and marched back to Russia and we could stop discussing this senseless war. But unfortunately, they're going to continue to be a zombie horde, and zombie horde do what it do. Bill Murray, then Anda. Bill, you're up.
Hi, thanks, Finance. I just read an article recently that said Turkey was going to start enforcing or close the Bosphorus to sanction. I think it just said sanction items or something of the like. And I was kind of just wondering if that would prevent the Russians from moving stolen grain through the Bosphorus. Hello?
Oh, Finance. I do.
In general has been very partial to allowing Russia to move whatever it wants through the Bosphorus, including what appears to have been military assets from Syria through the Bosphorus. So Bosphorus be open for Russia. They'll 100% be okay with some grain traveling through it, be it stolen Ukrainian grain or, quite frankly, Ukrainian grain. Turkey is likely to continue pushing to keep the grain deal open because against the piece of trash paper it's written on and the fact that it has no security guarantees, because Turkey's very corrupt middleman self and a bunch of the supporting fires nations of Russia and Africa all really want the grain deal because they get their food from Ukraine. So given that both of these things are true, there's a lot of push to renew the grain deal from the Ukrainian and African sides in Turkey. Turkey likes it because they get corrupt payments or legal payments. They're not corrupt. Turkey gets paid by having the grain deal, and Erdogan gets to be a kingmaker of sorts, right? He gets to be a global deal maker, strokes his ego. Ukraine likes it because they get their grain out, and people who are eating that grain like it. While the original grain deal had benefits for Russia, who thought that one, they might be able to destroy the port of Odessa. Notably, they attempted to do this the day before the grain deal was to take effect. And two, even if they couldn't do that, the grain deal allowed them to take out what you pointed out was huge amounts of stolen Ukrainian grain. However, Russia is not particularly efficient with harvesting in Ukraine. So territory that they have seized is not being optimally used. And territory that Ukraine liberates has a much higher chance of going under cultivation. So the stolen Ukrainian grain, which was probably listed as the bumper crop of Krasnodar, surprise, surprise, Krasnodar, which is Krasnodar and Belgorod, two southern regions of Russia. I may have gotten it wrong, maybe in Belgorod. That's Belgorod to the Russians. We call it Belgorod, the Ukrainian word. It used to be part of Ukraine even. It was Belgorod Oblast or Krasnodar Oblast, and a small possibility of wherever Rostov is. But that sort of area reported a record bumper crop and 15% improvement in farming last year. It didn't farm any better last year. That was all stolen Ukrainian grain, right? But the stolen Ukrainian grain's over. There's no more grain to steal. They did it already. They're not planting. Russia doesn't grow things. They destroy things. So there's nothing much for them to gain from the grain deal. But there is stuff for Ukraine to gain because it can keep getting grain out, even though its production is down significantly. And the people who will eat that grain obviously get more food. So there's a lot of people who want the grain deal to be renewed. Russia does not, but they may be pressured to agree because people that they need things from are really, really in favor of it. So that will be an interesting one to watch. Answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought. I didn't quite realize that the grain they stole wasn't off really out of the fields, but so much they just took it out of the silos, so it was already there.
But even if it's out of the fields, it's out. Like we just had winter, man. Like there's no right? They're not replanting. So, for the most part, maybe a field or two gets planted, but they're not going to broadly replant where they've taken it because they probably killed a ton of the farmers. Anyone who's a man of fighting age pretty much left. Anyone who's a woman of fighting age, probably escaped too for other terrible reasons, right? I mean, we're down to old people and kids are the only people that often remained in areas that Russia takes over. So given that, how are they going to cultivate this land, right? They're not planting this year. Cool. Moving on. Anda with the, I guess it's a fella picture.
It's a fella. I by the
Hey, it's a fella.
It's a fella. By decree, it's a fella. So, I will DM you the article is from November. What I talked about, the prisoners, and it was about the tank factory back then. So in November they were talking about a tank factory. So that's one, and second, actually I came up to tell you about a bit about Moldova and about the shore, and about my cat, right? About the shore party, which is being, how should I put this? In the last month, we have seen in Moldova an increase in discussions, right? Discussions which were mainly on the street, but not only. Against Maya Sandu, against Natalia Gavrilița, against a lot of things. And people have asked me, and not only me, but the guys from Moldova also, what's happening, right? Why? Why all of a sudden, after a year in which Maya Sandu managed to keep Moldova on the floating line, there is an increase in protests. And these protests are organized by the Shore Party. And the answer is they are making noise because they are being hunted, right? And they are being hunted because they took money from people that they were not supposed to take, and they paid with those money various persons in the Republic of Moldova in order for them to present themselves in the capital and look concerned. So yesterday, the Security Information Service from the Republic of Moldova, together with the prosecution office, and they also have a national center against against corruption. They have had an operation, a search operation regarding this illegal financing of the Shore Party. They used they searched what they were called a courier. How do you call them? Like a mailman, but it's not carrying the mail.
You said career. You said carrier.
Carrier. So they have carriers who are taking the money from one place to another, They were responsible for getting the money and transport them and deliver them to the president and vice president of territorial offices, which in turn will pay the transport. I think I explained yesterday the transport, the buses with which the people arrived in Chisinau, and also the people, because the people who arrive in Chisinau by bus, they are not arriving there as free volunteers with no money. They are being paid for that day. So they have detained 3 persons. In some of the amounts that were collected from their cars were in the area of 50,000 euros, and also lei from Moldova, and they have had a contact list. So now the security services have the contact list of those carriers. So this is not the first. This is not the first operation from the security service from Moldova. But I'm really, really happy that they are doing this and stopping this plague, because it is one thing to have people going in the streets like you see in Tbilisi, in Georgia, which are annoyed and exasperated with what's happening in the parliament. And they said, this is enough. And it's an entirely different thing when you pay people to come by bus in the capital to create a diversion, a distraction, to create an image of Moldova of lack of stability. This is not lack of stability. When you have people like me and like you going down, so exiting their house and going in front of the parliament, that's one thing. When someone else comes to you and says, here is $100, go outside and protest, that's not protesting, right? It is on TV. On TV you see the people, and you will say there are this amount of people, this amount of stuff. So yeah, this is what's basically happening right now in Moldova, and Moldova is fighting this as good as they can. So I hope it makes sense.
Thank you very much, Andy. Yes, it does make sense. I mean, we've seen these people being bussed in and things like that. It's not an organic movement, really, is it? You know, we've seen as well that they seem to have, you know, sort of 1 or 2 people who are appointed to lead it and to sort of, you know, get people doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a very organised and non-organic situation. I mean, I know if you're going to have a rally, you might organise something, but not to that degree where you've all got the same flags and, you know, they're all the same size and shape and produced by the same company. It looks a bit sus when you're all that together on your purchasing. And we've seen it happen before in lots of other places. where Russia generally just wants to cause a bit of a nuisance. Unfortunately, in Moldova, they can make a bit more of a nuisance at the moment, I think. Go ahead, Andrew.
So first and foremost, they created an image of lack of stability for Moldova, right? So that's one thing. That's important. And another equally important is the fact that, how should I put this? There are, for example, organizations we have in Romania, organizations of people who, for example, fund a rally, right? So I'll give you an example. Many 4 years ago, something like 4 or 5 years ago, we had a law that passed. It wasn't a law; it was a government ordinance, which passed which was passed during the night by the government, and we went outside and protested. And after that, we kind of organized ourselves. So there is an organization, an NGO, which receives donations. And for example, they will start a donation campaign for a certain rally. So they will raise money in order to buy the props that you need for the rally. Because, for example, in Bucharest, very few people make their own banners and everything. So I will go there and be in the rally, but I won't have anything written. So they organized this campaign. They raised money, they printed everything, and they distributed them at the rally. But people came freely, willingly. So when I went there, and there were like minus 10 degrees outside, and people were outside protesting, I wasn't paid to be there, and neither did others. I wanted them to stop. So I think that's the main point. When you go outside, like when you go outside and protest because you feel the need to make your voice heard, and you know this will matter, right? This is why I'm here at MriyaReport, because I want Ukraine to be in the forefront of people around the world, for them to know what's happening in Ukraine and to support Ukraine, right? So it's also a form of volunteering time, volunteering energy. So volunteer means I'm not paid for this. Neither is
Well,
you are.
I was going to say, Amber, no, unfortunately not, no. But while you're dying, I'll just say, time is the most sort of, expensive thing you can give. And if you're giving your time for free, then it must be for a good cause. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We volunteer because I volunteer because I can't give oodles of money, because I don't have oodles of money. I wish I did. But if I did, I'd be living on a yacht somewhere probably. So yeah, I probably probably wouldn't realise what was going on in the world around me because I'd be too blinded by my money. That's usually what happens, isn't it? They get into bubbles, these people, and they forget that the real world exists outside themselves. I would just welcome my co-host, Will. Good morning, Will. Or
morning, Mark.
wherever it is, whatever it is, wherever you are.
It is 2:32 in the workers' paradise, 2:32 in the afternoon, Perth time, Friday afternoon. So we'll be leading you into the weekend. And yeah, I had to answer a lot of Australian questions earlier today, but those have dried up, fortunately, and we can move back to Ukraine full time.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea for this space, to be fair. Although I'm sure the questions were about what help Australia was giving to Ukraine, surely.
Yeah. Yes, they were topical, but as Daniel brought up later on, which of course got my back up. He said, well, anything we can get from Australia is insignificant. And I said, okay. I said, I don't think, probably not totally insignificant. And we can always do more, right? If you look at the numbers of percentages of GDP that countries who are the liberal democracies have contributed to this, obviously Poland, massive way ahead, Lithuania, Latvia, Denmark gave all of their artillery pieces. So, I mean, we could do more, but Australia is and has been providing a contingent of trainers in England to help train up Ukrainian soldiers. $23 million worth of these lightweight drones and a bunch of Bushmasters. But of course, we can always do more. Was my point. And like Anda said, I mean, this is why we're here, because when I'm not harassing my government about what more we can do based on the expertise of somebody like Mick Ryan, when he says, I realize we're not going to do it, but when Mick says we could provide our entire contingent of main battle tanks, which are M1A1s to Ukraine, I said, yeah, we could. And his point and my point is, whatever we produce, whatever we're going to provide, talk is cheap. What we need to do is get that stuff there fast, because it's going to be needed very, very soon if it isn't already. And like Anda said, it's why we're here, really. I came back and got involved in MriyaReport by talking more and then co-hosting when I got back from America in October, and just decided I had to find even more to do. Right, I try to give some money. I've leased. Well, I've given a flat I've got here in Perth over to refugees when they needed it on a short-term basis. You just try to do whatever you can, like Mocker said, whatever's in your capacity to do. And I thought I've got to do more, like Anda said, to keep this in the forefront of everyone's mind for however long it takes until we've achieved success. And then I'm going to go party with War Doggo in Crimea and wherever else he wants to in Ukraine until I run out of cash. I see your War Doggo's down there, so welcome to back today. And you're driving the bus, Mockers. You got to tell us where we're going to go next.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the Ukrainians love the Bushmasters. I believe they come with great reviews from the Ukrainian armed forces, and also what you were saying about tanks there. You're not planning a land war across Australia anytime soon, no? Not something you had plans for, a major land war across Australia?
So no, but actually yes, right? Of course, because we do have to maintain a significant amount of capability in Australia to address these quick reaction force in case, I mean, it sounds absurd, but in case China or Indonesia or somebody decided to invade Australia. Nobody's at present interested in doing that, but of course, essentially this is what we were talking about earlier in the day. Australia's defense posture is hold out with a quick reaction force until such time as the United States can arrive. So, and the point is, of course, we're not going to give up our M1A1 Abrams and leave ourselves with nothing. But Mick said, okay, we'll send half of them because they're already scheduled to be replaced by the M1A2 of the Americans, and it's not like these ones are going to go, be sitting outside of RSLs in Australia because everybody's got one already. So they could shift them now, and with the point on timing, yeah, but you wouldn't give it up. More to your point, could the United States, if necessary, get 35 M1A2 tanks to Australia faster than China could get whatever tanks they're bringing here? The answer is probably yes, right? So some of this issue about whether or not we could give up half or all of our armor in the short term to Ukraine does kind of go to your point. What's realistically going to happen in the next 6 months, 9 months? And if the long-term plan for Ukraine is to have the M1A1 Abrams as its main battle tank, why not send them now? Put them in the pipeline, even if they don't show up until midsummer. They'll need them to backfill holes, and if that's the tank they're going with long term, start moving those over. Much like the MiGs. But you really see the absurdity of some of this when people say, "Oh, well, we've got to maintain some for our defense." Look at what Denmark did. They said, "You want our self-propelled artillery? Okay, we're going to give you every self-propelled artillery piece we have." Now, their conditions might be such that that's real, no real risk to them or whatever, but it's symbolic. It's you know what? I'm prepared to take a bit of risk in the short term to help you ameliorate the serious, actual, realized risk that you have there right now in Ukraine. It's the kind of thing I'd like to see my country do. It's the kind of thing Mick Ryan has been advocating, even if we realize that it's maybe not as 100% realistic as you would expect it to be, I guess.
Let's go to Wanda. She's had her hand up.
I had a bad joke that I will abstain. Yeah, the moment passed. Well, I have a question about the Bushmasters. So they were sent very early on. Like they were probably the first to arrive in Ukraine. Am I correct?
Willie,
Sorry, I couldn't get my mic off. Yes, they were close to the first, although obviously there were some M113s and some other things, but of these specialized armored personnel carriers and mobile things, yes, they were close to the first, but someone else might have beat us in. And multiple of the, so, and it isn't like they're invincible. They are a very good piece of kit, and partly due to the fact that one of the things that makes the Bushmaster quite good is that probably a bit more than the American military that are designed from the top down. The soldiers that are using these things in Australia, we're a small enough country, and the defense industry is small enough and pliable enough that if they suggestions or improvements while they're starting to issue those things, they took those on board and they really made them quite capable, even though small in number for us. And yeah, I don't know if they're just talking that to us about how much they like them in theater, but the Ukrainians have talked them up quite a bit, and they clearly are using them in danger, because I have actually seen from Russian telegram channels that some of the Bushmasters have actually been destroyed in service. But it does look like when these get destroyed in service, that they serve their purpose, and everybody gets out alive, which is really what you're after.
That's exactly it. The reason for this armor being given is not for it to come out the other side pristine and in fully capable working order. It's to protect the people that are using the equipment. And if it gets them where they need to be, then, if it's destroyed, that's kind of what it's there for. Equipment for war, it isn't for keeping forever in pristine condition. Even though maybe the Swiss thought that was what it was for. Yeah, that's not what it's for.
No, that was bullets that aren't meant to be shot, I think, right? Gepard bullets that aren't meant to be used.
And leopards that are in really good condition because they've kept looking after them. But apparently they're only for polishing.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you want to go ahead?
Indeed. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay, great. The Bushmasters, there goes a motorbike. I don't know if we sent this version, but they're also a very good command and control.
Aaron, you're breaking up quite a lot, but yes, they do make a command and control version. We can't hear you though now.
Hello, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, bit of a bizarre thing to say that we're not our contributions are insignificant. I'm pretty sure we're the ones sending all the kits for the JDAMs, so I don't think that's going to be a insignificant contribution when it comes to the counterattack and hopefully attacking the frontline defences of the Russians. And I think you'll find that there's a lot of medium significant countries contributing is what's going to really overwhelm Russia in the long run. And that, as with the drones, the $23 million worth of cheap drones and stuff, Australia's got a different way, and we need to have a different way of fighting because we're a different country. So, and a different way of logistics that would be. I bet you find that we're contributing on ways that you haven't heard on the in open channels. And Mick Ryan sort of alluded to it, that there's a way that America can do logistics, which is just because they're America. And then other countries the size of Australia or even Ukraine need to do their logistics in a different way. And that some of those ideas, I wouldn't be surprised, would be being shared with them. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a few things that aren't being mentioned in the media that Australia would be, contributing and helping with in regards to drones and so forth. So not the top line stuff, but I'm pretty sure it was an Australian who invented that drone gun that's been widely used on the battlefield. It was an Australian company that developed that. That's been quite influential on the battlefield as well. So, yeah, just trying to stick up for our Aussies contribution. I'll step down.
No, absolutely. No, Aaron, absolutely. I wish you were here earlier because, yeah, I mean, and it wasn't like it's not a competition, right? But if you look at overall what GDP, what percent of GDP is supplied, but your point is incredibly well made, and also in relation to what I had said. Oftentimes, the problem I have with Australia's aid provision is the timeliness of it, right? So if we're going to commit something, just do it and don't tell me about it. And we also talked earlier about the fact, well, I did, about the fact that oftentimes, people think of Australia as incredibly open and all this sort of stuff, and we are, right? But the thing that a little bit surprised me in Australia is if it has to do with national security or defense policy or what we're shipping where, Australia's pretty quiet about that stuff, and that's a feature, not a bug, right? I do not need to know exactly the numbers and anything that would give away any sort of order of battle information or when it's going to arrive capability wise. to anyone. I just think, we have a discussion about, are we going to provide aid? Yes. Are we going to provide a bit more than 1% of our GDP? I'd probably say yes. But when that shows up and how it shows up, don't need to tell me. And I do like that we keep most of that stuff secret, because it just avoids any capability of exposing any information on quantities and types of capabilities are given. And your other point is, a lot of when they decide they have a need, like these lightweight drones, from the time you hear about that need to the time that need gets filled, if that's filled by Australians, I really love that they do that. That they just get on and do it quick, because timeliness of supply of some of that stuff is critical, not necessarily the headline dollar value of what it is. Sometimes the type of what it is and the timeliness of it is very important. And don't worry, mate. But despite my accent, I was defending Australia strongly earlier, and I will continue to do so, because I do think we play a critical role in this, even in this war, even though we're so remote, because it just goes to show you how much the world is lined up against Russia on this specific issue. Mr. Bitcoin, what can we do for you, Koala? And we'll come back to you, Aaron, if you've got another question.
Yeah, good day, Will. Yeah, I just love the conversation around Australia, especially supporting Ukraine, and it'd be good if you even mentioned about that submarines. I just heard you earlier on, Will, about the sort of the land assets Australia would need if we did get invaded. Well, I live in Mackay, and I was in the reserve army for a bit, and I sort of understand where R&R are based in Townsville, and how they sort of routinely practice for, say, if we did get invaded by Indonesia or China, hypothetically. But I guess with them submarines, strategically, with Biden and Virginia class submarines, I guess that's sort of trying to sort of bolster up our capability at sea, and trying to sort of keep them threats from even getting a land, like sort of getting established on the land. But yeah, I did read an article recently around just with what we're supplying to Ukraine, and I know, I think it's October last year, about Albo was saying about we're going to send over an extra 30 Bushmasters and about 6 more of the M1 777 artillery pieces. So I don't know how much that's been delivered so far, but I mean, like, we've most probably got more Bushmasters we could give, and more artillery. But I think equally important to that, and I know the currently is still going through this at the moment with all of the R&R units, is that there's a lot of old, like, military kit, like the old webbing, like the old sort of boots, uniforms, and body armor. Like, it's all getting like updated with this new. It was being updated for quite a few years now, but there should be a big supply of that, like in these R&R bases and training centers. Like, just send all that to Ukraine, because even good boots, like, it's just really underestimated. Good body armor and good boots. I mean, we should have loads of that we can just give to Ukraine, I reckon.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I really, you don't want to clog up the aid channels with stuff that they haven't asked for. But you're right. I mean, basically, my position as an Australian is we should look through the want list. Ukraine, make us a want list of everything you want, and we'll try to see if we have any of that we can either give you out of stock, or actually deplete our capabilities some for a short period of time to get it in your hands. But if in fact they don't need a lot of boots of our size that are warm weather boots, and they need winter boots right now, then you might block. But yeah, I agree with you in principle that we got to look at everything that we're making. Like, for instance, Bushmasters. I would have preferred the government that they said, if Ukraine needs Bushmasters, how many can we produce out of Thale a month? And does 12 months worth of production of that work for you, Ukraine? Because if it does, we'll get started making them now. And if in 5 months you decide you don't need any more of those, then you can tell us to stop making them. But we ought to just get them going, get them moving, because when this war's over, Ukraine's defense isn't over, right? The stated goals are to push Ukraine, push all Russian soldiers out of Ukraine to the 1991 borders, and then carry on from there. It doesn't talk about going into Russia at all. But if a large amount of Russian Army, Navy, Air Force equipment doesn't get destroyed in this in that activity, then Ukraine's going to need a significant defense capability after that. And whatever they're provided in the medium term, not the short term, but in the medium term through the rest of this war, ought to be planning for their long-term defense rather than their short-term. And if, like, say, if they're going to go to M1 Abrams long-term, that's why it might be a good idea to start sending them that stuff nowish. Anda.
Hey, a question about Australia, and then I want to talk about Poland. So I like your approach, right? Basically, fill in what's not there, right? What you can give, and it's not already there, because people often say, "Give them everything, give them a lot, just give." But if you ever were at let's put it this way, if you ever were in the boots, in the how should I express myself nicely, for a poor family, I will give you this example. For a poor family who receives clothing, for example, if it's not tailored to their needs, what they receive is what you want to spare, right? So you're not asking, what do you need? You give them what you have to spare. And sometimes they don't need them, or they have too many of one item and not enough from another, right? Ukraine, for example, has set up their stocks for boots, for example, and clothes. To my knowledge, there was an article some months ago that they have what they need for the time being, and the most important thing that they lack is not boots and clothes, it's ammunition at this point, right? So all the experts said from 1 month ago that we should prepare and push for ammunition to give them ammo for the equipment they have, because for the moment they are okay, but they are going to run out at some point. And these things are not produced as fast as I thought. For example, I thought it's easy to make bullets, and apparently it's not. So that's why I totally agree with Will. And Will, I saw that Dave had his hand up like immediately after I started talking. So maybe before going to Poland, we should see what he has to say.
Certainly, as you wish, and then we'll return to you and go to Poland. Dave, what have you got for us, sir?
Hey, so along those lines of it's important to find out what somebody needs. This is a really interesting thing because with wheelchairs, a lot of people don't realize that a wheelchair is pretty much useless unless it fits the person. It's kind of like, if you just giving everybody a size 14 shoe, sure, it'll work for somebody who wears a 14 or a 13, maybe a 12, but it's not going to work for anybody else. And that generally tends to be, they're incredibly bulky, they're incredibly bulky and clunky. So we think that they're being, they'll feel good about themselves. Oh, I donated wheelchairs, but yeah, the wheelchairs you donated are useless. It's the same with donating, giving things to Ukraine. We need to ask them what they need, not just assume. And this is with one of the programs that I've been following in Ukraine is that the what's her name, Mrs. Zelenska, wife of the president. I can't remember her first name.
Olena Zelenska.
Thank you. Yes, she's been working on rebuilding the city. All these cities that have been destroyed, she's been working on rebuilding them so they are accessible. And I noticed on the committee that she has people with all different types of abilities. She had people that were blind, she had people that were deaf, she had people in wheelchairs. In this committee, finding out from the people who are going to be using this what they needed, and I think that's a key element. Not just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. We need to ask them what they need.
Great point, Dave. Because I mean, you'll notice in any disaster situation, war situation, whatever, that you do have to make sure that the aid matches the thing. And this is why oftentimes when I ask people about, oh, what can I do in time of a disaster, it sounds cynical, but it's true, because oftentimes the best thing you can do is find a good, honest, registered charity and give them money, because that's their job. They're on top of, like, the folks that are now providing and distributing non-lethal aid. Those folks know what's needed day by day by day. And if we make sure that the pipeline of money is filled up for them through MriyaAid.org, then whatever they need, and night vision goggles, tourniquets, like War Doggo was saying, every day. Basically every Ukrainian person, man, woman, or child, should be walking around any Ukrainian location in their purse or their backpack, or they're somewhere in their car, whatever. Every one of those folks should be carrying around a tourniquet, one tourniquet at least, right? The soldiers carry 4, one for each limb. So everybody should be carrying one. They know what they need. And so, yeah, if there is specific aid they ask for on their list that they want, knock knock, F-16s, then they ought to be figured out how to get them. But if your knowledge of what their need is limited, the best thing you can always do is give money, because bona fide, viable charities and relief organizations will know what's needed, and what they always need on their part to keep things going is money, which is why I'll do the PSA right now, this is MriyaReport, where we keep people up to date on information that we're finding out about the war in Ukraine in support of Ukraine. But we're allied with a sister organization, if you will, called MriyaAid.org. And it is incredibly easy to donate there if you have the capacity to do so. You can give to any Ukrainian aid organization that you choose in support of Ukraine. We would welcome any of that. The reason why we speak about MriyaAid.org is we know it's a 504C or a bona fide charity. It's been audited, and we know that every penny of it, it's staffed by volunteers, all have given their time for free, many given some of their expertise or money for free. And we know that all of the money that you give to Maria Aid for non-lethal aid support goes to getting the stuff they need and getting it to them in full. So that's why we always talk about Maria Aid, but you can pick any charity that you want or aid organization like U24 that goes directly to the Ukrainian government. That's also great, but we mentioned Maria Aid here because some of the founders of that were also the founders of MriyaReport, and we're here to give 24 hours, 7 day a week information and updates on what's going on in Ukraine. We welcome all speakers to come up and that you want to ask a question or make a comment about what's going on in Ukraine. You're welcome to do so. As the politics person has just done, just simply raise your hand after you're loaded up as a speaker, and we will call on you in order so that you can make a point or ask a question. Go ahead, Paul. Politics.
Oh, good morning. Just to back up, well, not back up, but echo what Nathan Day said. I'm disabled and I use a power wheelchair, and they are bespoke ones can be incredibly expensive. About in the UK, if you get a really decent one, start at about £10,000. So I don't know what that is in dollars, but there are lesser ones. But there is also a cultural shift within Ukraine in certain areas, and there is a disabled, it's called a DPO, a disabled persons organisation, that is working with the Ukrainian government and trying to work towards accessibility, but also the fact that there is a shift, and there is a cultural shift that is very slowly, but not quite there yet, around the fact that for many disabled people, particularly learning disabled, but not exclusively, who often are institutionalized as opposed to living within the community. And that hasn't quite got there yet. And I think that in certain ways, the war will accelerate that, because what they were saying is you don't see a huge amount of disabled people out and about. And I think that will begin to change. But certainly just saying I've donated a wheelchair might fit one person, but won't another. And they are working to try and get better wheelchairs and sort of equipment, not just wheelchairs. There's all sorts of things you need, from, hoists to crutches. There's so many different things. And I think that if anybody is interested in around supporting disability, then very much that needs to go through a disabled charity or disabled persons charity in Ukraine, because they really do know what's needed rather than what we think they might need. Thank you very much. I'll step down.
Well, thanks for that comment. Go ahead, Marcus. Oh, it's time for the MOD report, is it not?
Well, it is out, yes. Anda, would you like me to go to the MOD report? Would you like to add something first?
I would like to add something to this and to this topic, because I remembered something, and I'm sure Ukraine will face a similar struggle. So about what Dave said, it's not only about what they proper need, but I remember a problem that we faced with a potential employee here in Romania, which is not a country very friendly with people with disabilities, especially with locomotor disabilities. So there was one of our candidates which was really bright, really bright. But we needed her. It was a girl. We needed her in the office because we needed to work with papers and everything. So we wanted to hire her, and we figured out how to bypass the stairs, because we have a lot of stairs. and how to use the elevator and how to give her access straight to the elevators and everything. So she could go from one place to another. But the problem, her problem was actually that she could not get to us. So she needed to take a taxi. She didn't have her own car. So she needed to take a taxi because the bus, um, the buses, at least here in Romania, not all of them are friendly. Have not only all of them allowed her to jump in and move around and basically get to us. And she was in one location from where she didn't have access straight to the metro station, which is actually more friendly. And from the metro, she would have reached us very quickly. So unless you are in that situation, basically that was my point, you're not really aware of all the challenges the other one faces, right? Because you take for granted some things, like you don't even think about them, and for them they might be a challenge, right? So this is why I think it's a great thing what Olena Zelenska is doing, but it's going to need a lot of investment, right? Including in transportation, because people after war won't be lottery winners having money to buy everything they need. So they will need help. They will need the state actually to support them, and the organizations that are in other countries to support health organizations and charities in Ukraine in order to get things moving after the war, not only during the war. So it's not going to stop when everybody will cheer that the war is over. That's when the major rebuilding will start, and major rebuilding, as Dave said, should be smart, should be suitable for what's coming. Yeah, that was my point.
That's right. I would hope one of the things that they're passing through the Ukrainian parliament right now would be legislation. Let's call it Build Back Better legislation, such that when they rebuild all these old Khrushchevsky and Brezhnevsky style apartments that are standing up in all these cities, that they maybe use a modified design of those same sorts of buildings, but let's make sure that they're handicapped accessible this time, because it's almost impossible to retrofit. I mean, we're struggling with this in Australia. You know, it's incredibly difficult to retrofit buildings for handicap accessibility, and it's pennies on the dollar if you do it in the original design. And to be honest, you know, places that I've gone that are made handicapped accessible are actually just more livable too, because we engineers, when we go to build something and we try to get that down to the minimum amount of cost to build it, we end up building the thinnest hallways and the sharpest corners and doors with doors just on the other side and all these things that where we can think through what we're doing and make the housing a little more livable, even if but it probably doesn't, changes the cost of it a little bit in maybe overall size of the building, so that we can put in decent sized hallways and not some of these obscure corners and things. We should try to do that, because I know it costs less. And imagine the revolution you could have in Ukraine if they went and used all the old outside of every town is there's always a concrete slab factory, right? So they can make these Khrushchevsky, Brezhnevsky, all these buildings. And I bet a smart person who wasn't just focused on just cash could come up with some designs of of new buildings to replace the old ones that are destroyed, like all through Mariupol, that would be much more livable, much less, more efficient, more capable of managing energy, and also handicapped accessible. And Mockers, I apologize for adding that comment, because wow, now we have 3 hands in a row. And you want to do that MOD report now, or should we take the rest of these hands?
I think we should go to War Doggo first. Good morning, War Doggo.
Hi, dears. Hi, dears. Regarding the cities being more comfort for people with disabilities, is a long way to go. Is a long, important road to go, and I have to tell you that having a heritage from Soviet Union. Soviet Union was not great in making life of people with disabilities comfortable. After the Second World War, Soviet Union did the thing. They just simply at a certain moment said that it's not comfortable to see at the city so many people with the disability. So they grabbed all of that pure innocent people and they sent them to some places like Sandormokh, north or far east of Russia, to get rid of those who yesterday were forced to go to the battlefield, who lost their limbs and who lost their health, and like not really care of those, just they were not very convenient to observe such people on the streets celebrating the great patriotic war of all of that crap that they were putting in the people's daily lives, daily minds. What I'm trying to say that this heritage of Soviet Union not really taking care about people who need care will have a need also for Ukraine to better understand and to get learn what means taking care about people with this. One personal story. A person, let's imagine a person who has disabilities and who is using the wheelchair to move, and he's trying to get in a subway in a big city, million city of Kiev. I'm not speaking about the village or any even suburbs of Kiev. So we are speaking about the capital. He's moving to the subway, and in order to get down to the subway, you need to press the button, wait the lady to come. Is like 15, 20, half an hour if the lady is not busy. And she helps him to get through this automatic, how this called, escalator, down to the subway station, and she takes care of him till the train comes, and then the next lady comes to bring him up, instead of just creating the convenient infrastructure that the person can take care of himself. And a person who is involved in that, he always is in the feeling like, look, you don't have to care about me. I'm not an idiot. Just a disabled person. And I don't need that kind of care. I just can take care of myself. So this kind of Soviet style care of people with disability should not be replicated. It should be somehow learned what is the best practice, how to do that, because it's not a miracle. I mean, you just need to do the things happening and learn what are the novelties there and how to make it smart, how to make it right, that people who have that specifics, or the people that have disabilities, they feel like that they're treated with dignity, let's call it like this. I put it that way. I hope you're getting me clear. Thanks and hugs from Ukraine.
Hugs and love right back.
All right, sneak in. Let's go to and then NAFO Dave, and then we'll move on to the MOD report. Raheem, welcome up. What can you offer us, sir?
Hi, is it my turn or is it NAFO turn?
We decided to go to you first because you're new, and we like to treat all the new people a little
Well,
quicker.
I tell
What
I
you
tell
go ahead,
everybody
Nif,
I tell everybody good morning from Tehran. It's 10:46. I just wanted to ask, every war has to end with peace. What are I mean, I go to platforms, some are pro-Russian, some are pro-Ukrainian, some are pro-Americans. End of the day, those who are suffering, because I have seen by close skin the devastations of war. What is the I mean, I personally believe this war could have been if
So, Rahim, I don't disagree with you that this war needs to end in peace, and I think we all want that. But I think the as important point is some wars are worth fighting. There are some things worth fighting and dying for, or risking death for, and one of those things is the defense of a nation of an invasion by a neighbor who is trying to genocide them. It is without a doubt that Russia's stated aims are to make Ukraine not exist. It is denying the existence of the country, and it has committed to subjugate it in a manner which results in genocide in every location that Russia has occupied during fighting in Ukraine. They have left behind evidence of rape, torture, murder of unarmed civilians, and genocide, stealing children. All of these things to what is called genocide in the UN conventions. And some wars are worth fighting, and this is one of those wars. I am generally a pro-peace person, and a person who, like you, says that wars typically can be avoided, but when they can't, they can be won, and that's what we're about here, making sure that Ukraine wins this war right now. Thanks for your opinion, though, and I don't think this group is anti-war. We're just for anti-genocide and anti-invasion of your peaceful neighbors.
Yeah, sounds like a sensible situation to me. Nafo Davo, please go ahead.
Yeah, there is the war could end this second if Russia withdrew. That's all it would take. Russia, go home, and the war's over. I was just wanted to. I had my hand up earlier because I wanted to just quickly a kind of a foundational principle of its is that there's this inaccessibility cycle. So you start off with something that's inaccessible, like buildings or something, and then so people that are disabled people can't be in those public spaces because they can't use them. So the public doesn't see people with disabilities in the public spaces. Therefore, they think that people with disabilities either don't exist or they don't want to be out and doing things. They don't want to be part of the public space. So they don't make plans for anything to be accessible, and it just comes back again full circle. It's inaccessible, so people can't use it. So you don't see them out there, so it remains accessible. I think that's going to get thrown on its head in Ukraine because there will be no way to avoid seeing the people with the amputees and the people with spinal cord injuries and traumatic brain injuries. There will be so many that they cannot ignore them. So I don't think that's going to be an issue, but I just wanted to make people aware of that's a very fundamental thing, the inaccessibility cycle. It's real and it happens.
That's very true, and I've noticed that myself. Having my father in a wheelchair, yeah, very, very difficult when people just don't think about it because they don't see it enough, or they don't have experience themselves. Yeah. I have the MOD report. I'm very excited to read it out because it's usually a little bit cheeky. So we'll go with that for the moment. Ministry of Defence, MOD report for the 10th of March 23. So, on the 9th of March 23, Russia conducted a wave of at least 80 long-range strikes against Ukrainian critical infrastructure. Russia deployed cruise missiles, air defense missiles in a surface-to-surface role, Iranian one-way attack uncrewed aerial vehicles, and an unusually large number of hypersonic air-launched ballistic missiles during the attack. This was the first major wave of long-range strikes since the 16th of February 23, and likely one of the largest since December 22. Ukrainian officials reported at least 11 civilians have been killed. The interval between waves of strikes is probably growing because Russia now needs to stockpile a critical mass of newly produced missiles directly from the industry before it can resource a strike big enough to credibly overwhelm Ukrainian air defences. So that's the British MOD there in agreement about the fact that Russia seems to have fired off about as many missiles as it can produce since the last missile attack. There's been a big gap, and then obviously they've sent this particular missile attack, but it sort of coincides with about what they can produce. So either they're starting to get to the point where they're like, well, this is our critical reserve and we need to keep this, so we'll only send what we produce, because they are still indeed able to produce more missiles, or they are really, really low, which would be ridiculous. One of the things that I did notice was that it has become apparent from satellite images that all the stocks and reserves of missiles that are closer to the front and that are closer to the main urban areas now appear to have been exhausted, and the indications are that they are now moving missiles from further and further away. However, those missiles that were further and further away, well, you know how corruption is, out of sight, out of mind. So what they're finding is the only stuff that they're picking up from some of these stocks isn't any good. It's rusty. It's obviously degraded and not been kept in the right sort of conditions. So what does that tell you? That tells you that some of it probably won't even be very useful. So, you know, they may have had millions of missiles, but do they still all work? I think we've had evidence of some serious degradation of some of their ammunition, and we've also had evidence that some of their ammunition likes to just go up in the air and explode and not actually do what it's supposed to do. Terrible shame for them, I know. But these things happen. We've seen ammunition literally turn around and boomerang back on itself, and there is a lot of indication that they are indeed short of useful missiles, shall we say. Can't say they've run out completely. They may indeed be sitting on a stockpile that they're, you know, keeping for a rainy day, because I'm sure, as you've noticed, every country likes to go, well, what if we need these? So, you know, I have a feeling that Russia will do the same. They'll keep a critical stockpile somewhere. But yeah, they seem to have got to the point where they've not got a lot of extras to be throwing around. And That to me is hopeful, at least. Hello, War Doggo.
Miss Ria, can I because I lost the voice, could I continue my words on your?
Unfortunately, anybody who doesn't have manners, the answer's no. Sorry, War Doggo, go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that if you wonder, the story I've been telling before about deporting the people with disabilities in the Soviet Union, I just tweeted several articles. I couldn't find more, how to call it, like Wikipedia style articles. So there were the research of documents that were unclassified in the archives of the KGB. So you remember that with Ukrainian independence, Ukrainian Institute of Memory or Memorial, I don't remember how it's called correctly spelled in English. So they just unclassified the archives of the KGB, and many documents they were able to study and to understand and to think all the evil that were happening under Soviet occupation. So one of that was in 70s there was this kind of operations of almost like the 15 years after the Second World War finished on that lands. They were shifting the mood of people from feeling a sorrow and commemorating those people who left, who gave their lives for during that war, and Russian style or Soviet style, how to win the war. You already know and you see it on the ground in Ukraine. So practically all of that people were like useless in their fest celebrative mood, and you can link it to today. We call it Победобесие, is like how to call it when it's like evil celebration, let's call like this, how they do all this dancing, celebrating the great, as they call it, patriotic war finish up. And that was the story, how they put aside all of those people who were not really pleasant on the street. So those were the methods of Soviet Union that we know in many other cases show up the evidence what was the regime, but it's another brick in the wall of understanding how they behave, those people, with those people who gave their health in that war. They simply grabbed them and sent to Valam. Valam is north of Soviet Union, today Russia, and this is similar, like grabbing people and sending them to death somewhere, and not telling that part of are just simply executed, just not to waste time and efforts moving people here and around. So you can read that. I believe that if you deep dive the topic, you can find some articles that you can or translate if you are familiar with Cyrillic, or you can find in English more like Wikipedia style articles on that. What I just did, I just tweeted the research after the KGB archives were classified. A couple of articles related to that, something that I could find fast while we were talking. Thanks. Hagen Love from Ukraine.
Thank you, Odago. And yeah, you see, to me, the level of sort of a more enlightened society, I suppose, is one of the tests is how we treat people who may have vulnerabilities of some kind. You know, how we include people in our society despite, you know, any difficulties that they might have with regards to movement or understanding and things like that. How we treat those who need that extra effort. And it makes a difference. Also, you know, how we treat children and education and animals, you know, all these things add up to a better society because we're not constantly being horrible to one another. And all I see is that when I see any sort of information coming out of Russia, they seem to just be horrible to one another all the time. If there's a reason to dislike somebody, they will find it. And I understand that it's a completely different culture and mindset, but it's all about sort of dog eat dog. It's very, very odd way of thinking. I'm just going to tell you that my co-host Will needs to be thrown out of the co-host position and re-invited because he's gone wonky. He's got the Twitter pox. There's the one. So while he's Twitter poxing, I'm going to tell you about some fun facts about the poor conscripts. I know, the poor conscripts. We've seen all these videos of them complaining, haven't we? And what Chris Owicki has been doing is figuring out where these complaining videos are coming from, or at least what regions the people who are moaning are coming from. So we have at least 16 regions of Russia that are identified as, can you hear my cat? Crikey. So we have 16 regions of Russia where people have been identified from in these complaining videos. The complaints are generally poor training, lack of equipment, brutal command, mistreatment, and specifically being used as meat for suicidal assaults. So anyone who's been following Dmitry, War Translated, will have seen some of these videos. The independent Russian news outlet Vestaka has been analysing them and has been trying to identify where these people came from. So this is where the information is coming from. So he shows a map showing the most represented regions, and they are from places across the European and the West Asian regions of Russia, notably all fairly peripheral. The wealthiest parts of Western Russia do not even seem to be represented in these videos. So on the 7th of March, men of the 1439th from Krasnodarsk Krai and Irkutsk and Novosibirsk complained that they were sent to slaughter. So that's very nice for them. Also, on the 7th of March, mobilized men from Kaliningrad, Murmansk, and Arkhangelsk, maybe, regions are voicing similar complaints, along with threats from their commanders and being sent on deadly assaults with no supplies. On the 6th of March, mobilized from Belgorod Oblast, who were apparently territorial defense units, complained about being sent to storm villages with no preparation. On the 4th of March, men from Krasnodar region posted an appeal in which they were sent into senseless assaults, again with no preparation. Can you spot a theme? I spot a theme. On the 4th of March, mobilized from the Orenburg region, asked Putin to sort out the lawless orders under which they were being sent into assaults. Guess what? Without any preparation. And this time they also said they didn't have adequate equipment. Gets better. On March the 3rd, mobilized from Mordovia and Mariel appeared and appealed to Putin directly, saying that they had been assigned to the Luhansk military without documentation and then sent to carry out assaults without any preparation. Sorry, it's just becoming funny at this point. In February, mobilized men from Omsk, Tiva, Samara, Tatarstan, and Irkutsk. And Bashkortostan, wherever that is.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me, Dave?
Can anybody hear me? Or mockers?
Well, I was talking away, so War Doggo, are you there a second? Can you just confirm if I'm audible?
Yeah. I heard Naples for Dave, and I'm hearing you loud and clear. Is okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's your problem, Dave, I'm afraid. Thank you. So yeah, there was just a couple more, and I will give you those as well because I just found this amusing. So yeah, anyway, where was I? Omsk, Tiva, Samara, Tatarstan, Irkutsk region, Bashkortostan, maybe, Mariel, Kaliningrad, and Orenburg regions. Kaliningrad, eh? And Orenburg regions also made appeals. Same story. On the 13th of February, Dmitry posted news from the large-scale offensive, and this was the fourth Mobic unit filming an appeal to the MOD, wondering why they were supposed to be on the third line of defences and were suddenly frontline assault troops without adequate equipment. There are some themes going on, aren't there? On the 12th of February, obviously, again around this large-scale Russian offensive, second unit of mobilised transferred to the so-called DPR, complained about being sent as cannon meat to achieve Russian goals, and these were all from Kaliningrad. So we knew they'd moved people out of Kaliningrad, but we didn't realise that they'd basically rounded up whole groups. We heard on the 11th of February, the mobilised from the 1231 Regiment posted a video that they were upset. They were upset because they'd been robbed of all their equipment and sent to assault a high ground that the locals have been unable to take forever. Several battalions of them were slaughtered before they gave up. So this is notably the second big wave of mobilised appeal videos to have appeared. The first was after late September in 22, when many were rushed to the front lines with little or no training. There's, again, that theme. From November through to the end of January, there wasn't a lot of these videos, and it likely reflects who was taking the brunt of the fighting, particularly the Wagner and contract soldiers. And of course, that they probably would have been less likely to make appeals. So yeah, the launch of the new offensive at the start of February seems to have prompted all these waves of complaints, and it's a terrible shame for them. It really is, isn't it? I like to bring this jolly news in a morning because it cheers me right up. Good morning, Yanis. What do you think?
Yes, good morning. Oh yeah, it's expected news. So it was something they feared from by like to take people from those big cities and rather like Russian cities. And especially I'm surprised about Kaliningrad because it's very specific region, and I have some experience and now, unfortunately, now some folks from Kaliningrad, they are very, very, very patriotic. So the whole nature of this Kaliningrad, it's like very tricky. It's separate region from mainland Russia, and they are like under very strict monitoring. So yeah, it's interesting. What I'm afraid, and I hope it's not the case, that they are using those folks just to gain time for like training or preparing like regular army forces or something like that. I know that it's hardly unlikely, but you know, like they just using those Wagnerites and conscripts just to gain some time.
Here's the thing, Yanis. Is that sorry? I'll just mute you a second. So here's the thing: they have been so desperate in the past for trained people that they've used a lot of their trainers in the battle, and they've lost an awful lot of their experienced army members as well. So I would say it's going to be a bit difficult for them to continue to train up soldiers. And I think if there was any major training going on, we'd know about it, because we've seen that they have been taking people to Belarus and using Belarus as a kind of training ground. But we've also had first-hand accounts of the training that's been going on at the Russian training grounds, which is pretty much a little bit of firing range training and not a lot else. So even though they were apparently on a week's training, apparently most of that week they spent bumming about doing not very much. I do believe that there is an issue with trainers, that they're struggling for people to train. They were even using their trainers, air flight trainers, to man some of the aircraft, we're led to believe. So yeah, I would say if they were training a big army somewhere, we would have spotted that. I really think so. Go ahead, Yanis.
Yeah. I totally, I hope it's okay. I totally believe that it's most likely the case, and I remember that it's most likely the case, and I remember it was even or even the summer of last year. There was reports that they are moving like tanks and IFVs from those training facilities to the front. So even if they have like someone as a trainer, they definitely are lacking on equipment side. So yeah, it was just like my low possibility chance that they are like trying to somehow deal with the situation. But yeah, I have one additional comment on geography, and one you are the topic you are mentioned before on those rockets. Did you spotted the news? It was like 2-3 weeks ago from Kiev Post, and it was about Chinese Ministry of National Resources, which apparently in China is responsible for maps, etc. And there was a news that China is now using different names, old original names, for a couple of big Russian cities in the east, like Khabarovsk, Omsk, Sakhalin, etc., etc. And I'm just wondering, what does it mean? And it was interestingly It was announced by Chinese side the 23rd of February. Also a very interesting date. Yeah, and what can it mean? Why? Why such timing? And do China want to say Russia something with this move? Thank you.
Yeah, I saw that, and I didn't put an awful lot of weight behind it. It might be what they call shitposting. It might be a bit of misdirection or having a bit of a poke at Russia there. To be fair, those lands are so far away from the main centre of Russia. Don't think there's going to be any major issues right now. I'm pretty sure China's not going to invade those particular areas. The fact that they're using names that they recognise for these places is, well, it's an anomaly, but I don't think it speaks to an intention as such. Nafo Dave, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for that synopsis of. I've heard I've seen videos here and there about soldiers complaining, but it just you putting it in a list like that and going through them, that's a lot of insubordination going on. It doesn't sound like a very like their army is going to hold together very well. Just thank you for putting that together. And if you have this in an actual like a list list of links, I'd really like to see that.
Yeah, I'll fire you the tweet over. It's Chris Owicki. He does fabulous roundups of what Russia doing or what Russian conscripts doing, and so far I'm really impressed with his research. It always brings a smile to my face because he just lays it out as he finds it, and this is all coming from Russian sources. And we've seen the videos with our own eyes. We can see that these people are obviously quite disgruntled, and it just amuses me greatly that these are the people who are supposed to be the best. These are Russians. These are strong, shocking troops of the Russians. And, well, the reality is they're really not, are they? They just want to go home. Or they just, no, sorry, they don't. They want to be better supplied and looked after. They want to be treated like soldiers. But of course, they don't know how to do that, and they haven't got the logistics supplies to make that happen. And they're corrupt as heck. So, like, for example, there was a video of a couple of conscripts coming across a house full, one room was full of food and gifts that had been sent from conscript mums and things like that. Gifts of cakes and biscuits and what have you. And they literally broke into this place and distributed it amongst themselves. But some of this stuff had been sat in there for so long that it was going off. It was mouldy and not worth having. And that was stuff that they could have been using to keep themselves alive. And yet somebody decided to hoard it in a place until it was no good anymore. And that seems counterproductive, surely.
Indeed, very counterproductive, and it's amazing. I saw in addition to Chris's note there, I saw a summary of apparently about 14 of these incidents where people have made videos that were either openly totally mutinous or just complaints back home about and to Putin or whoever. It's I agree with Dave in general that this level of dissent in your army at the front is something that would never be seen in NATO, any of the liberal democracy countries. It's just unheard of. I mean, almost impossible to plan for, because how do you know and if any of these units is going to be reliable when they're most needed? It's crazy.
And with the general lack of training and preparedness, and them being thrown into the front, they are almost as good as useless.
Yeah, indeed. It's like Chuck said this morning. You could take a guy, out of the unemployment line, or out of a prison or jail or whatever, just a simple jail or wherever, out of a trade in any place in Russia, and put a gun in their hands after 2 weeks of training. He said you can call him a person, you can call him, but you couldn't call him a soldier. And and they'll face the very high death rate. And it's amazing, don't you think, Mockers, that the language that some of these guys talk in, the absolute resignation that they're definitely going to die. That message the other day that War Translated had out about the guy, saying, go ahead, send us to prison. We're ready to go now. Come get us, and put us in jail, because we're definitely not going to go do that. And we don't care if we need to get a taxi out of here. We'll call a taxi. It's just it's coming home to them. And if it's come home to, I guess, 14 at least units that they've published video evidence of these people making pleas for better training, better equipment, anything, get us out of here. We're supposed to be the reserves, whatever. Any of these things that's happening like that, those guys that go home, and all the Russian prisoners of war who get traded back, and those guys go home, those guys will talk about how well they were treated, and the soldiers that go home, that make it home, will talk about how incredibly stupid and wasteful is the task they were sent to do. And you just can't believe that it won't affect morale throughout that country again. And John Spencer tied that to, this morning, their capability when they do another, whichever form of mobilization they're going to do, whether they go to universities or whatever. He said when they did the last mobilization, of that their target was 300,000 people. They got somewhere maybe just over 200,000 people in the mobilization, but 400,000 people left the country. So it's got to reach an end at some point, but who knows where with Russia, because the world record holders in willing to accept large losses throughout their history. They really just don't see their individual human beings, soldiers, as human beings, I guess.
Indeed. We have another tale, another sorry and serious tale for convicts in particular. Now, we know that the Wagner Group are no longer being able to recruit from prisoners, but the MOD are able to recruit inside jails now. So, according to one inmate, the MOD offered payments and the removal of all criminal records for agreement to fight. They were promised they would only be sent into battle after a full 3 months of training. Can you imagine what happened with that 3 months of training?
Yeah, probably standing around a lot.
Well, 3 days after signing their contracts, they were taken to a village near Donetsk where they were given a 1-week training course and issued a minimum of equipment, which was basically small arms and shovels. They expected to fight under the Northern Caucasus military district of the Russian army as contract soldiers, but in their own words, were resold to the Donetsk People's Republic army, presumably to replenish one of their decimated military units. Commanders then tried to send them into the battle, but they actually refused. I think there was about 75 of them. In a covertly recorded conversation, their officers explained the men could be shot to restore discipline if they disobeyed. And the discussion soon turned into quite the argument The men protested, complaining that they were not trained and they had not been given copies of their contracts. They suspected that this was a deliberate ploy to ensure that when they died, they could be written off as missing. And guess what? If you're missing, your family don't get any payments. It's shocking stuff, I know. The men also complained about lack of equipment. They were assured by an officer that they only required 1 grenade launcher and 1 radio per squad, and that a shovel, probably this famous MPL 50 entrenching tool designed in 1869, was the most useful thing they had. Obviously, they weren't reassured, and they continued to refuse to fight unless the terms under which they were recruited were honoured. They said they were willing to fight and atone for their crimes, but not under these conditions. Their commander claimed that other convicts, a previous group of 75, had not refused to go into assault because they were big, manly men. And somebody piped up that they had crossed paths with that particular group, of whom only 11 returned alive, and they were all seriously injured. After a lengthy argument, one of the officers told the men, "You are effed." We'll keep it clean this morning. One of the convicts said later that day that the men were lined up by the DNR paramilitary group, who then decided to beat them all up. They were loaded into trucks and taken to Donetsk city, where they were imprisoned in a basement without any provisions or facilities. They since reported that they had been removed from the basement one by one, most likely subjected to some sort of physical and psychological pressure, and then disappeared. They believe that the Russian authorities are well aware of what's going on, including sending people into suicidal assaults, but are ignoring the issue. So 11 of these men managed to escape at some point and are currently on the run. One of them recorded a video from an undisclosed location. Should I surrender? Will they take me alive or kill me? To whom should I surrender? I don't even know who's who or who to trust. And so that's yet again another amusing entry from the Chryso Wiki files. And I just, well, it's not a great situation to find yourself in, is it? Go ahead, Dave.
No, it's not. And I have one that just came across the Telegram. As long as this was about 8 mobilized Kaliningrad citizens that they were conscripted and they were promised on the borders. There is also no food or medicine in the field camp. They had to buy their own shovels. They didn't even get issued a shovel. They had to buy their own shovels. And when they were mobilized and learned that they were going to be sent to the front, they decided that it would be better just to run away and surrender. But the police the police did not want to accept anybody with weapons, and so they did not accept the surrender, and so they were recaptured by the military and are now being face up to 15 years in prison for desertion. I guess that 15 years is better than just being shot, but we don't know which is going to happen to them, I guess.
Well, they're starting to realise that they'd rather be alive than mince meat. I think, you know, that's it's progress.
Yes, it is, and I hope to continue to see this kind of low morale and disintegration in the ranks, because if the soldiers refuse to fight, there's no war, and they'll have to go home.
Well, exactly. The morale is such that it's not going to take an awful lot to break through these lines, I don't think. When it comes to it, when Ukraine are able to make a significant breakthrough anywhere, it's going to be evident just how fragile the situation is, I think. We saw it with the Kharkiv offensive, where they broke through the first lines and there was nothing holding them up behind. So everybody behind those lines got the heck out of Dodge as fast as they could, because they realised that Ukrainians were coming through and taking no prisoners right at that moment. And that's what they need to do for the rest of the area that they're currently occupying. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to save their lives. Also, I do need to comment on, sorry, Will, I do need to comment on the happy faces of those 90 odd prisoners who were going back to Russia. Those guys on that bus looked really cheerful, didn't they? I think even one of them had tears.
Yeah, solemn and a little bit depressed. In contrast to the Ukrainians who were coming back, and they looked ecstatic. Which even though they were in phenomenally emaciated shape, they looked incredibly happy to be back. The Russians looked like a bit like they were on the bus to go see the principal or something like that.
Something I did hear from a spokesperson for the negotiating team who does these prisoner swaps has actually stated that this last lot of returned prisoners were actually better fed. And one of the reasons is because Ukraine has been sticking to the Geneva Convention, and all the people that they've sent back have been properly treated for injuries and, are in good condition, well fed and looked after. And it was an agreement that this would obviously continue on the belief that the Ukrainian prisoners would receive better care. And at least in this case, a lot of these prisoners did report that they'd received more food recently. So perhaps that's something that has been negotiated, and hopefully they will continue to receive slightly better treatment. Even if it's only slightly better, it's better than what they were receiving before. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mockers. It's going to be a quick one because I'm mid-Malamute and all sorts of other things. But I was just going to say, don't you think it's time for a major psyops operation? Where basically the Ukrainians drop behind the lines of the Russians, pictures of the pretty wonderful conditions that the Russian prisoners of war are being kept in by Ukraine. And that surrender now, and you could have this. It's not over the top, but from what I understand, it's like 3 square meals a day. And they're treated quite well. So maybe that's the thing to tip them over the edge.
Well, I've seen photos and videos of these places where the prisoners are being kept, and they're not lavish in any way, but they're comfortable. The bedding is clean. They're given food and cooking facilities, and they sort of, to a degree, they sort of manage themselves as a community while they're in there. And apparently, it's much nicer than any of the prisons that they've ever been in before. So I think, in a way, winning hearts and minds, you can't do it with words, you've got to do it with actions. And I'm hoping that this will have some sort of impact.
I agree with you totally again, Mockers. That's absolutely what I was thinking. It's got to, well, I'd like to think it's got to have some effect, but then, we don't understand the Russian mind, do we? So, but anyway, let's hope. We'll keep our fingers crossed on that one.
Good morning, Tim.
Yes, good morning, Tim. The pride of North Wales.
North Estonia at the moment, to the extent that there is a North and South Estonia. It's kind of blob shaped and not very big. Good morning, everybody.
G'day.
So, Tim, would you like the numbers? Have you heard?
Do you mean the number of Russians who've been deanimated?
Yes, those numbers.
Yes, I can't think of anything I'd rather hear.
Fabulous, because I do have them somewhere. I'll find them again. I'm sure I will. Oh, there they are. Right. So, numbers, scores on the doors are 870 liquidated personnel. That's gone up. 7 tanks, 6 armoured personnel vehicles, 10 artillery systems. So, over the past few days, that's more than 40, I think. 3 MLRS, 2 anti-aircraft war systems, 1 aircraft, 9 UAVs and 34 cruise missiles. We spotted them. 6 vehicles and fuel tanks, but we have 3 additional special equipment. And what was one of those, Will? Was it some sort of flame-throwing device?
A TOS 1A thermobaric launching MRS.
Excellent.
I think I know what the aircraft was.
Go for it.
So, yesterday it was reported that Ukrainian forces had shot down an Su-25 Frogfoot, which is a fairly light ground attack aircraft used by former Soviet and Soviet-aligned countries. And they did it, apparently, with a Polish-made Piorun missile. Now, this is quite an interesting little thing. It's basically commie Stinger, right? So it was based on a much older Polish system called Grom, which is in turn based on a Soviet system called Igla, which is kind of the Stinger era. So came out in the 1980s. So a man-portable air defense shoulder-launched missile. The Poles took this system and went with it. They've done several modernizations, one of which was Grom. The latest one is Piorun, which came out in 2019. So this is an infrared homing missile. It's been a bit of an export success. So a number of countries operate this. Poland obviously operate it, Norway operate it, and Estonia and Latvia have ordered it as well. Yeah, this seems to be a pretty effective system. The United States have made enormous orders, presumably for Ukraine, and the Ukrainians themselves have been buying it directly. So 1 aircraft reported destroyed yesterday in the numbers. I think it was the Frogfoot being shot down by this spiffy Polish missile. So thank you, Poland.
Well, that sounds pretty excellent.
All hail Poland. I have another Polish item. Anda passed me a message, but when she had to drop, she said about in mid-February, their permanent duty station at Camp Kosciuszko in Poland, outside of I can't remember where she said it was. Let me pull that up, and I'll tell you, it's outside. one of the Poles is you can jump on me in a second. Being picked up at Poznan. And it's interesting. I found this very interesting because in Australia, the highest point in the country is Mount Kosciuszko, and it's named after Tadeusz Kosciuszko, the same guy. Obviously, by some Polish person who was here and appreciated that general's work back in the day that Tim probably knows all about. So the interesting part of this is that Poland, the United States announced that they were going to make a permanent station of soldiers in Poland, and the first of the 10,000 has arrived, and they'll be stationed there at Camp Kosciuszko, which I just found interesting because of the tie to Australia again.
Sorry, talking for a muted mic. So, Tim, we've also done the MOD report, and it mostly concentrated on what's been happening with the missile strike. However, I want to read you a little bit of it. Here we go. The interval between waves of strikes is probably growing because Russia now needs to stockpile a critical mass of newly produced missiles directly from industry before it can resource a strike big enough to credibly overwhelm Ukrainian air defense. And we were pontificating a little bit about what Russian missile stock's doing. We know they probably still have quite a few.
Especially, Marcus, since remember about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, we were talking about the fact that the factory that makes the Kinzhal and the Iskander missiles had a fire, and in a warehousing area. So I'm not sure if that has any effect on their rate of reproduction of those. Yeah.
Well, I would say
a month's worth
certainly a target. Put it that way.
Yeah. And I know that Chuck said this morning that the key with defending those Iskander missiles is probably taking out the platform they're mounted on, the Tu-22 or the MiG-31. But because if you'll notice the way that missile strike played out yesterday too in the timeline, Tim and Mockers, the first thing that they used was the Shaheeds headed toward Zhytomyr and Lviv, and then they took off planes from the south and the north, but they were Su-32s, so that they could make them think the missiles were coming, and then they staged the missile launches of the air launched missiles with the Iskanders, such that those would be in the air and being the target of air defense when they then launched the Kinzhals, meaning that they're really building up all the missiles that they can and staging them in a way that makes them the hardest to defend. Until such time as they get more air defense in place. And yeah, I mean, the good news on that is, as I reported erroneously the other day, but I can now report as multiple source fact, the first of those Patriot systems for Poland has actually arrived, but it's not limbered. It wasn't in use yesterday, but it is in country. So not too long away till they'll be able to see if those Patriots can help turn the tide there. But still got pretty good record. They shot down, I think, just about 70% of the missiles that were incoming. But while 30% of the missiles making it through is going to do some damage. And I have not yet seen the overall casualty count that was identified by the Polish government as yet.
Now, the Patriots, the Patriot batteries are quite important, right? Because they're one of only a couple of systems that can deal with hypersonic missiles. So you have Patriot, you have Iris-T, and you have UK Sky Sabre, which they don't have yet.
But apart from that, they don't have anything that can deal with the hypersonic ones, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not sure if the Patriots have been fully tested on hypersonic missiles, but yeah, I just don't know.
I saw it written that the Patriots are able to deal with that, and that would make sense. It's American, so it's probably quite good. It seems to be the rule of thumb.
Is that? I thought if it was British, it was good.
No, if it's British, it's excellent. Except the ones that aren't. So the first iteration of Rapier was a bit of a disaster. That's the was until the introduction of Sky Saber. Rapier was the British go-to, medium to heavy air defense system. It didn't perform particularly well in the Falkland Islands, and they were thinking of getting rid of it. Instead, they upgraded it to Rapier 2000, which was, I believe, was an effective system. You saw Rapier 2000 became world famous when they started parking them all over London during the 2012 Olympics, and everybody was going, "Oh, what's that thing?" And it was designed to deal with terrorist air threats in the event that they materialized, because nobody wants to get caught with their trousers down in that way, do they? They were also deployed when President Obama visited London on a state visit. I can't remember exactly when that was. Was it 2009, 2010? And I figured that if it's good enough to protect a state visit by the boss, then it's probably a system that has a reasonable degree of international confidence, shall we say. So Rapier 2000 was okay. They're in the process of phasing it out, and they've introduced Sky Saber, which is based on a missile system, which is based on an Anglo-French missile air-to-air missile system. I can't remember what it's called. Is it ASRAM, Will?
Yeah, ASRAM.
Which is a pretty modern thing, as I understand it, but I'm not hugely into missiles, so maybe you know more.
Neither am I, but that is the way that the British usually make excellent kit. They take a good piece of U.S. kit like the AH-64 and turn it into a longbow, and adapt other things. So, Tim, if all those rapiers went around London, I forgot about that for the Olympics. Maybe what we're looking at in Moscow is that with those Panthers, maybe Obama's going to visit Putin.
Or they're hosting the Olympics.
The seven nation authoritarian Olympics.
Yeah, the tanky Olympics. They can do Belarusian style, special forces aerobics to music, to kind of manic rock music, and embarrass themselves. I love those videos. They keep pushing them out as well. I don't know why they keep making them. They're so cringe.
It does look a bit like rhythmic gymnastics.
It does, and maybe that's the point, right? The Soviet Union, communist countries, they went in for mass gymnastics in quite a big way. They still do it in North Korea. It's called the Arirang Games, and it's really quite spectacular. If you look it up on YouTube, it's tens of thousands of people in stadiums doing things in perfect unison. And the Arirang Games is actually a career in North Korea, a career as in a job in North Korea. So there are professional people who only do the Arirang Games for the whole of their careers in Korea because they're Korean. And so it's like a form of athletics for them. There are people who do this professionally, and that's all they do for their, as long as they're physically able to. It's just bizarre. So maybe it's that kind of Soviet mass gymnastics legacy, but with a military spin. Either way, it's even more hilarious than anything NATO has produced. So I do hope they keep pumping out these videos. So, Will, talk to me about Iskander missiles. Because I thought they were a ground launch thing. I thought they were the big tubes you saw on the back of lorries. But you just said one was air launched.
No. I said that they launched the ground launch cruise missiles at the same or at a time to make sure that those were the ones that were attempting to be interdicted. They also shot some S-300s from the north in ground launch mode, in a ground attack mode, to mask the fact that these Iskanders were taken off to make sure that they made their targets. But you're right. The Iskander is a ground launch, and I think there's a sea launch variant of those missiles. And I think they used all different platforms for the launches yesterday, so that they could do all 81 at the same time.
So, what kind of class is this in? Is it a true cruise missile, or is it more like Russian attackers?
So the Kinzhal. Oh no, the Kinzhal's truly a air launched cruise missile, but it's final flight path is like a short range ballistic missile. So it lands a lot like the Iskander does, which is the plane takes off, the MiG-31 takes off, gets it up to speed, goes nose up a little bit, launches the Kinzhal, and that Kinzhal will go to a height of approximately 600,000 feet, so that then it can start its dive trajectory and reach Mach 12, and it's a thousand pound to 500 kilogram warhead. So they do make a big boom, and this is the problem with trying to interdict them. That when something goes that high in the air, you would normally try to detect it with a space-based radar system, and the ground-based systems don't go that high. So there's a bit of a radar gap as these things are starting to make their descent, which makes them currently very difficult to pick up and hard to hit, right? Because we were discussing this morning some of the papers that are being written in the DARPA about how to defend against these things, and sometimes a very low-tech solution is the answer to a very high-tech problem. And we were noting that the Lancet loitering munitions have been taken out by a cope cage, which is great, very low-tech solution to a high-tech problem. But the Iskander is much more difficult because, of course, with coming in that fast, very difficult to track and hit it with anything other than something much like World War II flak, right? If you throw a bunch of metal garbage up in the air fast enough, you might be able to interdict it with that. And I think Raytheon or Rand was examining whether or not they could shoot sand, compacted sand clouds up to, because at Mach 12, it doesn't matter if it's a bug you hit at Mach 12, it can do some damage and could basically shred or the skin of those things and make them probably not land where they're supposed to, but probably still do some damage when they land, but not effectively.
See, that's interesting because I hadn't considered the vulnerability of objects moving at high speed in that way. Is this something that the engineers are able to mitigate at all?
Well, that is what apparently is being worked on in the United States right now, to close that radar hole between the stratosphere and the troposphere, so that they can track these things the whole way. Because having to pick up something only when it re-enters the troposphere means a lot less reaction time, and then you've got to aim and fire and all that sort of stuff. So I think that the issue they're trying to cross is the interspatial radar issue, not necessarily the missile, the counter missile battery. But there's also some examination of whether or not something like the Gepard's being replaced by a piece of equipment that's not incredibly upgraded in armor or how it looks, but it shoots bullets, which are still the 35 millimeter bullet that goes out, but rather than a discarding sabot that tries to hit the thing that's incoming, it actually has proximity fuses so that the 600 bullets that it can fire a minute go out into a cloud of exploding bullets to take out things like drone swarms that they were worried about. And to be honest, I think if they get the timing of that firing correct and the trajectory right, that Iskander, or sorry, a Kinzhal flying through a hail of lead that a Gepard could put up would also, I reckon, knock it out. But it remains to be seen. Hopefully the Patriots can get there because they can reach quite high, and I think they can take it out before it reaches its maximum velocity, which is more important because for aiming purposes. Yeah.
Now, something I'm skeptical about when it comes to the hypersonic missile concept is the fundamental economics of it. Right? There have been a number of schools of philosophy on this, and one of the things that it was thought was that the best thing to do is probably to overwhelm air defense with a lot of cheap munitions. That was kind of the logic behind suicide drones like Iranian Shahed. This has proven questionable, shall we say, simply because these things are so low tech and they're so vulnerable to pretty basic air defense, systems. We have seen footage of Ukrainian soldiers just shooting at them with small arms, for example, which presumably they're doing because it works. I don't know if they have lost any of these things, any of these things to ground fire. But if you feel you can, if you feel you can shoot it down with small arms, then that it's obviously something that they're doing. And then we have the very, very high end, this hypersonic concept. Presumably, it's an enormous technology investment. It's also quite expensive to produce. It delivers a bang, as you say, a 500 kilo warhead, but that's not that much bang. So it does make me wonder, whether they've really nailed the economics of this, simply because we know Russia has been short of missiles. Strategic missile forces is something that Russia has certainly emphasized in the past. It was a big thing in the 90s. So the post-Soviet Russian army went through two stages of philosophy. In the 90s, conventional forces were de-emphasized for funding, and strategic missile forces were were very much emphasized and invested in. Then they did a switcheroo kind of around 2005. Where the strategic missile forces went out of fashion and conventional forces were emphasized. The modernization and upgrade of the regular Russian army was emphasized. And even still, Russia does have a separate wing of its armed forces that deals exclusively with missile systems. And they're still running out of missiles, right? So this is something that is emphasized in Russian doctrine, this kind of overwhelming strategic firepower that they think they have. And it has delivered surprisingly little effect in Ukraine. So my thought is maybe that basing your military posture quite heavily on these spiffy hypersonic and cruise missile systems, they're a nice to have, but they don't turn the tide of what you're trying to do. Maybe that's a philosophical failure on the part of Russia. Maybe it's just symptomatic of their wider military incompetence and malaise. But it does seem that this kind of fetishization they have of missile systems doesn't seem to have delivered the effect they hope it would on the battlefield. What do you think, Dave?
Oh, me?
Yeah, just chucking that out there. Is this
Yeah.
are missile systems something that Russia is proving are not quite as relevant as they thought they would be? Because I guess is my question.
Yeah, I read an article about that today that it seems like the bigwigs in Russia, Putin et al., had seemed to have placed a lot of faith in these missile systems and being able to overwhelm the Ukrainians, and we're finding that these missile systems are not able to overwhelm them, and in fact, it takes them a month to manufacture enough to shoot on for one day. And the Patriots haven't even been deployed yet. So, I mean, there is the concern of the hypersonic missiles being difficult to hit currently, but I think the Patriot system is going to take care of that. And they're well on their way to being deployed. I think there's reported one is in the country already, just has not been deployed as of yet for the public to know, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. So let's have a quick roundup of the headlines. So on the early hours of Thursday morning, there was the largest bombardment of missiles against Ukraine by the Russian aggressor, reportedly in the last 3 weeks. At least 9 civilians have been reported killed. 6 of whom were in the Lviv area. One of the strikes was on a residential area in Lviv Oblast, which is around 500 miles away from the front line. 3 buildings were totally destroyed by fire after the attack, and they think they will probably discover more dead when the rescue workers finally finish. As the rescue workers start going through the rubble. So 9 Ukrainians, all civilians killed. The attack also briefly disconnected Zaporizhia nuclear power plant from the grid, and it was said to have gone on to emergency diesel power to prevent a nuclear accident. The power plant was apparently quickly reconnected to the grid. On this, Rafael Grossi, who is the head of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has urged action to protect the plant's safety and security. Russia, during this missile attack, there were 81 missiles launched in total, as well as 8 of the Iranian Shahed drones. Ukraine has said it shot down 34 of the missiles and 4 of the drones. So it does seem that the air defense has been somewhat effective in combating these strikes, with half of them shot down. I was quite surprised about only 4 of the Shahed drones being shot down. I have heard it said that these Shahed munitions are very, very vulnerable to ground fire, and 80% of them are being shot down by Ukrainian air defense. This time, only 50% of them, but they did have some missiles to deal with as well, so perhaps that is understandable. Russia has said that this was a retaliatory strike. Interesting language they're using there, which was payback for a cross-border raid last week. They have claimed that it had a massive effect on its intended targets, destroying drone bases, railways, and damaging arms manufacturing and repair facilities. As far as we are aware, they have only succeeded in killing 9 civilians and hitting a residential area in Lviv, as well as damaging a Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is protected infrastructure under international law. So that was the missile strikes. We are expecting to hear of more of casualties growing, especially the strike in a civilian area in Lviv Oblast as emergency services comb through the rubble. In other news, the Alexei Danilov, who is the national security boss of Ukraine, has said that Bakhmut continues to hold, and that Ukraine is suffering 1 casualty for every 7 Russians killed. He is claiming that Ukrainian soldiers are killing as many as 1,100 Russian soldiers a day,